right. How's everyone doing? Welcome to another Friday Live. Hope everyone is doing great. Good to have you all with us so we can talk about Joe Biden and what's going on with number 46, Joe Biden, who has been missing in action at times, and at other times he's been cut off from speaking, which is just very bizarre. And we'll talk about Joe Biden in a little bit. Let's see where everyone is joining us from. I believe I saw Spartan Warrior Queen somewhere in the live stream, in the chat. Our awesome moderator, the one, the only Spartan Warrior Queen. Good to have you here. And Valley S kicked things off. Valley S with a $20 super chat. Awesome, Valley S, way to kick things off. And we will do, we'll talk for about 30 minutes, give or take. Then I'll put the link for some calls, and we'll read super chats and answer questions via super chats. We'll talk to people via the call in, and we'll pass our Friday afternoon or Friday morning or evening, wherever you are, talking Joe Biden and talking other geopolitical issues.
Absolutely.
So Alexander, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Slightly colder today in London and a bit clouded over, but that's par for the course in March. It's, what they say, March winds and April showers bring forth May flowers. It's a cold, wet, windy month generally in England. But other than that, I mean, we're fine here. We're enjoying the spectacle, that's to say my wife and I, that we see across the pond, as we say. When we talk about the pond in England, we mean the Atlantic, and we talk about the United States. Enjoy may not be exactly the right word. There are times when we are in tears because we both have very strong feelings about the United States and, great respect and admiration and love for the United States. But at times it's been difficult also not to be wryly amused by some of the very strange things that have been happening too. And of course, lots of other things going on around the world, and all very interesting. And no doubt we'll be discussing all those in this program. And I am very much looking forward to talking about those things and to our enormously positive and indeed wonderful interactions with our viewers. Just to say again, you feel shy, you feel nervous, don't let that get in your way. We are very, very keen to hear you and to answer whatever questions or to respond to any points you might want to make to us.
All right. Brian Berner coming in with a $5 super chat. Good job, guys. Thank you, Brian, for that. And let's see, we have Emil from Sweden joining us. We have, who else? Canada. Tino from Canada. Awesome to have everybody in Canada and in Sweden. Hope everyone is doing well in those great countries. Let's see, we got UK in the house. We got hello Hollanders. We have a video on the Netherlands and the election coming up this weekend. So everyone that is interested in what's going to happen in the Netherlands with the elections, where Mark Rutte is expected to win, that won't be a surprise, but there is a lot of news coming out of the Netherlands and we're on top of it. Hello Cheryl, how are you doing in Massachusetts? USA, awesome. Great state of Massachusetts. My brother went to Boston University, been to Boston many a time. Great city. Ottawa, Canada, joining us. Greetings from Ohio. Minnesota, USA, another great city. Minneapolis, Alexander, I've been to Minneapolis a bunch of times. Fantastic city. South Wales, all right. South Wales, Taiwan, Kiev, another great city. Have you been to Kiev, Alexander?
No, I've never been to any part of Ukraine, actually. So I've never been to Kiev, but I know that it's a beautiful city. Yeah. By the way, my Russian friends in Moscow always speak very warmly about it, and they say what a wonderful place it is. And I used to hear stories about them, that Moscow is the place to work, but Kiev is the place to live. There is a very, very much more pleasant and attractive place in that respect than most other places in the former Soviet Union and Russia are. And so, I mean, I've always been interested, and of course, it's got tremendous monuments. I mean, it's got, there's the cathedral there, and there's the Lavra where all the monks, are, and all sorts of extraordinary history too.
Yeah, it's a beautiful city. Really nice people, really friendly people in Kiev. Hello to everybody in Scotland, in Saudi Arabia. How are you doing in Saudi Arabia? Jamaica in the house. Great to have you in Jamaica joining us. Let's see where everyone's joining us for a little bit more as more people shuffle in, and then we'll get talking about Joe Biden. Hello to everybody in Miami, 20 degrees Celsius, best city in the world. Yeah, Miami is pretty cool. That is a pretty cool place to live. You are definitely lucky to be in Miami, especially with a governor like DeSantis, who kept everything open and running. Hello to everyone in New Delhi, Tennessee, Mississippi, awesome, Atlanta, Georgia, Oslo, Norway. All right, great. London, Nigel, how you doing, London? South Wales, UK, Australia, Belgrade, my next destination when everything opens up. Belfast, good to have everybody in Belfast here. Flagstaff, Arizona, my former home of Arizona, great state of Arizona. Awesome. All right, Alexander, people are here, they're chatting, they're waiting to hear about Joe Biden. So the question that we're going to all try to answer, everyone together, is what's going on with Joe Biden? What is up with Joe Biden? He gave a really, by the way, we have a video on Joe Biden coming up tomorrow as well, but he gave a really mumbled and strange speech at the Munich conference, the Munich Zoom call. They call it conferences, but they're all Zoom calls now. And he gave a very mumbled and strange speech, which I know you detailed on your channel, Alexander. So everyone check out Alexander's channel. The link is down below. Also, make sure to smash that like, guys. It takes 1.5 seconds to hit that like. So hit that like as well as you're entering the room. That was a really weird speech, Alexander. And then we had Joe Biden leaving some sort of meeting. He was with Kamala Harris, and the press was kind of sitting out there. And they managed to squeeze in a question, and Biden gave like a one-word response, and that was it. And he looked completely like out of it. I mean, just out of it. And then he just shuffled on. And then we had, of course, the other Zoom call. Everything's being done with Zoom. I don't know why Pelosi just can't meet with Biden in the White House. But anyway, he's doing a Zoom call, and Pelosi's on the other line. And they finish up the Zoom call, and Biden's like, well, I can take some questions. And all of a sudden, everything just cuts out. And that was it. And the interesting part is, when you look at that video, I'll tell you this. I don't think the cutting out was the interesting part. Was when Biden was talking to Pelosi and kind of, doing some chit chat, some fun banter with Nancy. Pelosi had that look where, I don't know if you guys have ever sat with your boss or superior at work, and you're not doing well at the job, and your boss is kind of looking at you from across his desk and just kind of shuffling his papers and just saying, it's 5 o'clock, I need to go, just get out of here, you suck. And I don't want to really hear from you anymore. That's what Pelosi was like. I mean, Biden was talking, and she was just like shuffling her paper, just kind of like, in a couple of months, you're leaving anyway. And that was kind of her demeanor. And I was just kind of like, that's interesting. And I'll end it here, Alexander. There was supposed to be something going down in the Capitol yesterday, and obviously nothing went down. But we still have the wired fencing. We still have the National Guard there, and it seems like every couple of weeks or so, they're finding another excuse to justify the National Guard sitting in D.C. And I'm thinking to myself, and I'm saying, you have the Democrats moving to get to take away Biden's nuclear code powers, his powers to push the button. You have them working there. That's the Democrats that are doing that. You have the Democrats, along with the Republicans, working to make sure that Biden can't go to war. I believe it's a 28th Amendment. I believe that's it. I don't know if it's the 28th. I know it's the 25th and the 28th, but you have them working on that as well. And I'm thinking to myself, you also have the National Guard troops who are still in DC, and they keep on making excuses for them to stay. And I think to myself, are we about to witness in the next, I don't know, 3-6 months, maybe the next year, kind of a transfer of power. In other words, the Democrats, I'm trying to pick my words carefully for YouTube, getting rid of their leader in order to put Kamala in there. And that's why they need those National Guard troops there. That's why they need to make excuses all the time. They're just doing that just kind of to make sure that this transfer of power, this retiring of Joe Biden goes over smoothly without a hitch. And there's no, kind of people upset in DC or anything like that. Are we looking at something there? What do you think of what's going on and what's up with Joe Biden?
I mean, I should say if it does happen, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And it would provide some explanation for this, on the face of it, very strange decision to keep the troops in Washington. And as you correctly say, I mean, they find an excuse every couple of weeks to keep them there longer. And that is very strange in itself. And you have all that wire fencing and all the barriers around the Capitol. And it's all very odd and very strange. Now, can I say, if that does happen, it does bring to mind political events in a different country, the Soviet Union, where, of course, there were transfers of power arranged behind the scenes, within the red walls of the Kremlin, that, one day somebody would be there and the next day they'd be gone. And one of the indicators that sort of thing was happening, it happened in 1953 when some members of the Politburo, led by Khrushchev and Molotov, moved against Lavrenti Beria, who was the chief of the internal security organs, the secret police. And it happened again in 1964 when the Politburo, led by Brezhnev and Kosygin and others, moved against Khrushchev. When all that happened, one of the indicators that signaled to the outside world that there was a power struggle going on, or at least a shift of power, a transfer of power was happening, is that suddenly the streets filled with soldiers, that the people who were taking charge were moving troops into Moscow to make sure that they had the capital securely under control whilst the events were going on within the red walls, and the person who was in found himself out. And then when they found themselves out, they weren't in a position to pull any levers and stage, if you like, a counter move that might bring them back. So, if you want to say that, the troops in Washington might be an indicator of this, well, it may be. I mean, it would make sense. It would provide some explanation. The United States actually has been a very peaceful country, politically speaking, over the last few weeks. I mean, there was the protest in Washington on the 6th of January, but there's been nothing very much happened since then. There was all that wild talk, if you remember, that there was going to be this attack on state capitals up and down the country, and no one turned up, and apparently nothing of any seriousness was planned. There's been false alarms about events in Washington since then, during the impeachment, for example. But again, nothing untoward happened. Donald Trump's people are overwhelmingly extremely law-abiding, conservative people, the last sort of people to lead an insurrection against any part of the federal government. But, it's possible that what's making people nervous is the fact that, as I said, all kinds of things are happening, within the White House and the Capitol Hill building and the headquarters of the DNC that we don't know about, and that the troops are being kept to maintain an appearance of control whilst all these moves play themselves out. As I said, there's so much about the present political situation in the United States which has, frankly, uncomfortable analogies to what used to happen in the Soviet Union, that the presence of troops in the capital at the time when power was transferred from one person to the other would not be, would be consistent with all those analogies and would not break that pattern. But can I just say, the general story, it seems to me, of the Biden administration, it's now been in existence for around 6 weeks, is of an administration which is outwardly extremely active. We've seen this blizzard of executive orders on a scale which is completely unprecedented. I believe there's been around 60. There's been this blizzard of proposed laws, from HR 1 to the relief program to all of these kind of things. Most of them at the moment it looks like bogged down in the Senate, but that's also been going on. But the reality is, behind all this appearance of frenetic activity and purpose, you get the sense of an administration that's hollow, and hollow at its center. The president is almost invisible. I mean, it is like those Soviet leaders towards the end of the time of the Soviet Union, Brezhnev and Andropov and all the rest, who ceased to make appearances, and people were wondering where they were and what had happened to them. You've got a president who's not answering questions, who's not meeting the press, who's not going to Congress to give speeches, who muffs his speeches when he does make them, and they're, as you correctly said, virtual speeches when he does make them, like the one he made to the Munich Security Conference, which, as you rightly said, was completely incoherent and gave every appearance, by the way, of having been written by a committee. In other words, not written by Biden and his speech writers, but written by a group of people, which is why it never really came together in any clear, structured way. And at the same time, and this is what I find so interesting, is you have moves by the administration itself or some people within it, which seem almost designed to draw attention to the fact that the person at the center of the administration, the president himself, is in some way not fully performing his duties. So you have the transcript of the speech that he gave to the Munich Security Conference with all of Biden's slips and mistakes and errors, all recorded and published on the White House website. We have Kamala Harris telephoning world leaders like Emmanuel Macron and Justin Trudeau and talking to them as if she was the president. We have that strange virtual meeting between Biden and Pelosi when Biden is cut off at the very moment when he says he's going to answer questions. We have also the fact that he's not meeting the press. He's not had a press conference, and this is already starting to create some kind of disquiet. And also that political leaders that he might be expected to have issues with, like Erdogan and Netanyahu, they've slow walked his meetings with them, and one gets the sense from the readouts that those conversations he has had have been extremely carefully prepared. It's almost as if there was somebody in the White House who was actually working to draw attention to the fact that Biden himself is having difficulties. And last but not least, and most striking of all, at least for me, because it was not public, but it happened before a group of powerful people drawn from the political class itself. There was this 2-hour meeting, which actually did take place in the White House, between Biden and those Republican senators, in which the Republicans came to discuss the relief package and to explain why they couldn't vote for it in its present form, but were prepared to offer compromises. Then they found apparently Biden somewhat disconnected, but nonetheless apparently willing to engage with them, but they realized and sensed that there were other people in the room who were actually completely unwilling to make any compromises at all. And they seemed to be overruling Biden and not letting Biden make whatever decision he wanted or thought he wanted. And several of these Republicans, off the record, have apparently identified Ron Klain, who is the chief of staff, as the person who they think is making the key decisions on many things. So it's a hollow administration. It's also, as I said, a very ambitious administration. If you look at its program, and the things that it's trying to do, it is the most radical and left-wing administration the United States has ever had. I mean, whatever your feelings about HR 1, if it were ever enacted and brought into law and made to stick, it would transform the way elections take place in the United States. It would concentrate things in the center, in Washington, and it would weaken the role of the states in US elections in a way that has never been the case before. I don't expect that law to pass, by the way, but it's a radical measure and it's being proposed. The relief package is also, on the face of it, very radical. Lots of these executive orders, which we've seen being produced on a kind of production line basis, if you take them each individually or indeed in total, they form a very, very radical program. And yet, despite all that appearance of frenetic activity and radicalism and purpose, at the center, you sense that it's all hollow and that the man in charge is not really fully in charge at all.
Yeah. Also, no State of the Union, even though in the first year, they can let the State of the Union pass, but usually a president does give a speech, even in the first year in office, even though it may not be called an official State of the Union. So that was also bizarre. So what we have, Alexander, is, in my opinion, we kind of have a power vacuum.
Yes.
But we have a lot of people in the White House and around the White House kind of, doing their own thing, so to speak. And they really are. You have, like you said, Kamala Harris, they're prepping her to take over for Biden, and, teaching her how to call world leaders and how to talk to world leaders. I think that's what's going on there. They're working her into the job, and she's doing that. You have Lloyd Austin, who did the whole Syria thing at the Pentagon, and you had Kamala Harris was pissed off at him because supposedly he didn't run it by her, or Biden didn't run it by her. I don't think he really ran it by Biden either. So I think she's pissed off because Lloyd Austin in the Pentagon is also doing his own thing. And Kamala Harris probably went to him and said, you should come to me and tell me if you're going to strike Syria. And he's probably like, why should I come to you? You're just the vice president. And Joe Biden said, okay, do it. Not that Biden would even comprehend what's going on. And so I think you had that tension there because Kamala Harris kind of feels like, they should start treating her like the president already. And Lloyd Austin is kind of saying, hell no, I'm going to do whatever I want at the Pentagon. So you have him doing his own thing. You have Blinken, who outlined, I think it was an 8-step foreign policy initiative for the U.S. But the funny thing about the foreign policy initiative that he outlined is that I think 5 of the points had to do with domestic policy.
Yeah.
I was like, this is weird. He talked a little bit about China, a little bit about democracy abroad, and the rest of it was about U.S. domestic policy. And I'm sitting there going, okay, so the Secretary of State is also inserting himself in domestic policy. So you have Blinken kind of, saying, I'm going to do my own thing. And then you have, of course, Klein at the White House, the chief of staff, kind of holding together the White House operations. So really you have a bunch of people, they're all off, like you would say a bunch of executive managers, the VP, the COO, the CTO, and all these people in the company. There's no real CEO, or the CEO is out to lunch. And all these, upper level execs are all just kind of running the company, according to how they think it should be run. And this is just ripe for some sort of entity to fill that vacuum.
Absolutely.
And they know what's going on. The Republicans and the Democrats, the Pelosi's and the McConnells and the Schumers, and I'm sure that Donald J. Trump's and everyone who's in and around what's going on in the White House, they understand that this is a very delicate, sensitive, odd, nervous situation.
Absolutely. This is exactly what happens when you don't have somebody clearly in charge. Because if the person who is supposed to be in charge isn't performing his job, isn't able to take the decisions, isn't able to supervise the officials and to keep them in line and to give them orders and, to keep them on their, that they're doing the tasks that he is setting to them, then of course the whole thing starts to become dysfunctional and break down, and factions start to fall. Because, as you rightly say, Kamala Harris is the vice president. She may think that she ought to be in charge in this kind of situation. And of course, we've seen some moves in Congress, perhaps by people who are favorable to her, to try and give her some kind of authority by giving her the right to be consulted, for example, over use of the nuclear codes. A most extraordinary step, by the way. But then, of course, you say you have people like Lloyd Austin and says, I don't need to consult you. You are not in the actual line of command. So why should I consult you? So he's able to make his own decisions and not refer to her. And she gets angry and you start having issues with him. Then, of course, you get Blinken, who's perfectly happy to make not just foreign policy, but domestic policy also. He too knows that there's no one above him to rein him in and to tell him, look, stop doing that, concentrate on, sorting out the Middle East, or talking to the Chinese, or discussing things with the Europeans, or taking steps about Russia. He doesn't have anybody doing that. So he's roaming around saying what he thinks about a variety of topics, and also staking out claims to run aspects of policy, US policy, namely, in this case, domestic policy, that fall completely outside his remit. And of course, you've got the chief of staff, who is trying to keep things together in the White House, but he ultimately isn't in the line of command either. I mean, why should Blinken or Austin, who are after all have cabinet rank, take instructions from him? He is not the president. Klain is not the president. He's not able to make the decisions for the president. So that's what tends to happen in a situation where no single person is in charge. At the moment, they have tremendous momentum behind them, because building up for a very long time, there's been this very radical package that the Democratic Party has coalesced around. And we've talked about it on many programs. We've talked about, the projects for identity issues, their foreign policy, which, by the way, remains incredibly ambitious. I mean, Blinken talks about democracy promotion. He says he doesn't want foreign wars and regime change. But of course, you can't really have the one without the other. You can't have the kind of democracy promotion he's talking about without the foreign wars and the regime change operations. So I take that all with a mountain of salt. But we have all of that. We have the very aggressive steps that have been taken in the Middle East, which we did a whole live stream last week about. We have all of these things which built up before. But at the same time, the engine is stuttering. And we have all of these things that are simultaneously happening, which show that the engine isn't working properly. So we've had the disastrous Neera Tandem nomination, which should never have happened. And that was a foolish and bizarre step, but it was clearly something that had been brokered amongst the Democrats, between the Democrats themselves, because there is no real president. They never really took the proper soundings in Congress that they should have done. If they had done, they would have known that she was unacceptable to the Senate. But nonetheless, so they went ahead with that, and that all went wrong. We have all kinds of problems with all the various legislation that's being put together. And last but not least, and most remarkable of all, this supposedly establishment administration is having extraordinary difficulty filling up all the middle and lower ranking positions within the executive. I understand that Biden has up to now only nominated people for 58 posts out of the hundreds and thousands that he needs to fill. That's not because he's been getting much pushback in the Senate. It's just that it seems to me that appointing anybody to any post now is a complicated process of negotiation within the administration and the Democratic Party between all the power holders, and without someone ultimately to make the decision and say, I want this person, I don't want that person, no decision on any particular pick is made. So a machine, a motor that is supposed to be driving at full speed, but with a stuttering engine. And one wonders, slightly changing the metaphor, how long it will be before the wheels fall off.
All right. So you have what's going on in New York with Cuomo, which is bad. And I mean, the nursing home stuff is really bad, but it does serve as a type of distraction.
Yes.
You have this, what was supposed to happen yesterday in DC, which just didn't happen, but you're going to keep the troops in DC. But this was all over the media. It was on CNN and MSNBC. They were talking about it all day. Nothing happened. That was also a distraction. You have this whole never-ending, now it's Dr. Seuss, but tomorrow it'll be something else. It'll be, in a week, it'll be, Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner. and then after that, it'll be, Porky Pig and the Tasmanian Devil, and all these Looney Tune characters. I'm sure we'll get the axe in the next week or two. But my question is this, and listen to where I'm taking this. The Munich speech was also done via Zoom, and all the speeches are now done via Zoom. So obviously that's to Biden's benefit. But now you have all these distractions. You have everything happening with Zoom, so they can try to manage it for a while.
Yes.
Okay. But now you have a bunch of red states, and I mean a bunch. I mean a lot. I don't know what the number is. I think maybe 10 or 15 last I counted. Someone in the live stream may know, that are now opening up full.
Yeah.
They said, enough, we're opening up. So that's going to be putting the pressure on the Biden White House and the United States in general to start opening up. And when you start opening up, that means you have to start traveling. You have to start going around the country and doing speeches.
Yes.
And if everything starts to clear internationally, that means you have to go to G8s, G20s, other certain meetings around the world. How is Biden going to do any of that? And I know that the Democrats, and I was looking at the live stream too, someone put it in the live stream as well, and I've been saying this for a while too. I know the Democrats would like to drag Biden for another 2 years so they can get Kamala in there at the 2-year mark and then get her to run 2 terms after that. If they put her in any sooner, then that counts as a first term. But how are the Democrats, how are they going to keep this going for the next 2 years? They can't make enough. There's not enough Dr. Seuss around to make people, to distract people and make them go crazy. There's not enough Cuomos around, or maybe there are enough Cuomos, but I wonder, are there enough Cuomo scandals to go around? They can't keep on, every month they can't keep on saying, something's going to happen at the Capitol, something's going to happen at the Capitol. I mean, there's only so much distractions that you can do, and the pressure of the red states opening up, I think, is really really problematic for the Biden White House and for the Democrats, because I think they're saying, you know what, maybe our 2-year plan is not going to work, and we're going to have to kind of deal with Biden earlier than that, because it's sooner or later, Alexander, he's going to have to travel somewhere.
Yes.
He's going to have to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the point you understand about politics and about, the way things go on around the world, especially in your country, by the way, like the United States, which is engaged in things all over the place, which is a very active foreign policy, where decisions are being made all the time, and which is at the center of the world economy, is that stuff happens. I mean, there's that famous comment that a British Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, once made, in which they asked him, what do you most fear? And he said, events. I fear events, because events always take place. There's always something. And yes, you have this decision by the red states to start opening. But of course, it's not just that. You also get the sense that the Republican Party having shrugged off its divisions, having overcome its divisions that were fostered during the impeachment, it became very clear that the anti-Trump faction within the Republican Party is frankly minuscule, that it's just a marginal group. The Republican Party gives every impression that it's now coming together and it's starting to coalesce and it's starting to push back. So we're going to see an internal domestic challenge of a very conventional but very strong political nature coming through the institutions. So the Democrats don't look particularly well ready to deal with that. So that's one thing. We have crises starting to develop around the world. We have a situation in Ukraine where there's indications that the Ukrainian military are considering, for example, launching an attack on the Donbass, and the Russians are making threats about that. And just before we appeared on this program, I was reading an email you sent me from someone that had contacted us, who was talking about indications of aerial activity and troop movements between Italy and Germany, with American troops moving backwards and forwards. So something may be going on there. We don't know, but it's possible we're going to have a major crisis in Ukraine. We are always likely to have a crisis in the Middle East. That's always baked in the cake. It's sooner or later something's going to happen. We have problems which are starting to appear in the bond markets. The bond markets, the financial markets, are becoming increasingly worried about inflation. They're looking at the vast tidal wave of money that the Federal Reserve Board has poured into the world economy and the US economy over the last year, and they're becoming concerned that the Biden stimulus is too big and that it might pour even more money in, and to all the wrong people, by the way. But they're worrying about that. And you see bond prices are falling and yields are rising and all sorts of problems going on. You can't keep up the pretense of a president in charge when that president is not in charge, when you're talking about the United States for very long. Sooner or later, and it's always sooner rather than later, key decisions have got to be made. And in order to make those decisions in a situation where the government is becoming factionalized and dysfunctional, it becomes increasingly obvious that without a central figure to make those decisions are not being made, and that's going to reduce confidence even further. And that's probably now only weeks away, perhaps even sooner than that. And then, of course, the other thing is this: trying to keep a transition at bay for 2 years until after the midterms, which I think was the original plan. It's going to be particularly difficult if there is obviously a vacuum of power at the center, because obviously that's going to be exposed. But there's another factor, which is, of course, we see that Kamala Harris is already arguing with people like Lloyd Austin. And she's going to be arguing before long with other people, because that is the inevitable result of factionalized government. Everybody is constantly pushing and pulling to take things in their own directions. So it could very well be that by delaying this for very much longer, what you will find is that a coalition of people start to emerge within the administration who are united in only one thing, which is that they don't want to see Kamala Harris take over as vice president. And if she does take over, well, perhaps they're going to do everything they can to sabotage her when she does. So that's the kind of result that you start to see if you put this thing off for too long. You end up with a vice president who becomes president, who not only lacks popular authority because she was not elected, but who doesn't actually have a solid and united team behind her. So nature abhors a vacuum, so does politics. You have to fill that vacuum fast, What are they going to do? Do they have a plan? I do wonder. And if they do have a plan and they carry it out quickly, what are all those tens of millions of people who did vote for Joe Biden in the election? What are those people going to say when they end up not with Joe Biden as president, but as with, say, well, it would have to be Kamala Harris, who many of them don't like.
Hence the troops in DC, the never-ending presence of the troops in DC. Guys, I'm going to drop the call-in link. I'm going to drop it into the live stream right now. And if you're going to call in, make sure you have your camera off. Make sure you have headphones. Good mic on the headphones. Most headphones have a mic. Headphones, camera off, and Chrome, Firefox. Don't use Safari. Safari does not work. So Chrome, Firefox, Opera, those types of browsers. Brave, which is the best browser, those browsers do work. So I've dropped the call-in show link. I'll drop it in again. And there it is again. And just make sure that you have your camera off, and we'll get some call-ins. And let's take a quick look at the super chats, Alexander, as people may want to jump into the call-in and queue up. Let's see. Joseph Melendez sent us $4.99 super chat. Thank you, Joseph. From Marley Bedford, $7.99 super chat. Thank you, Marley. Tom, $4.99 super chat. What does the EU plan to do with Southern Europe once recovery plan is used up? Unemployment will skyrocket and their economic future looks bleak.
Absolutely. What does the EU intend to do? Well, again, we have the push and the pull. What the EU Commission wants to do, what Emmanuel Macron, who's the president of France, wants to do, what some people in Southern Europe, like Mario Draghi, who is the new Italian prime minister, want to do, is they want to have a situation where the European Commission becomes a kind of European government with a Treasury Department, taxes, and wants to have direct transfers of funds from Northern Europe to Southern Europe. That's what the whole business of Eurobonds is all about. Eurobonds is about debt sharing between European member states. Ultimately, once you evolve into that situation where you have debt sharing, you have to have joint taxation in order to fund those debts. That means you need to create a Treasury Department. It means you have to have taxes to provide funds for that Treasury Department. That's what they want to do. But of course, you have other people within the EU who are absolutely implacably opposed to that. And interestingly enough, those sorts of people are in the richest and strongest European states. So German public opinion is very opposed to this idea. Dutch public opinion, which we have an election coming up in the Netherlands shortly, has also been opposed to the idea. There's opposition in Slovakia. There's opposition in Finland. There's opposition to this in many places. So at this moment in time, we have this enormous tug of war going on between those people within the European Union who see this coming crisis in Southern Europe as an opportunity to push the integrationist, globalist agenda much further, to turbocharge it forward, to say that unless we do this, first the euro will start to crack and the Eurozone will start to crack, and then the entire union will collapse. And then we see those people in the north of Europe principally who say we cannot afford this. This isn't what we ever signed up for. The treaties say otherwise. When we joined the euro, we were promised that this would never happen, and we are going to resist this to our very last breath. So we have this tension, and sometimes one side appears stronger, and sometimes the other does. And on top of this, we now have a transfer of power underway in the single most important EU state, which is Germany. Angela Merkel, that great centrist, this prophetess of immobilism, who's managed to hold things together in Germany and to some extent in the European Union by making sure that everything happens in the most minimalist way. She's moving. She's leaving power in September. There's a new man supposedly taking over, Armin Laschet, but he's not very experienced. He's not been very involved in politics in Berlin. He's never held important posts. Well, he's never held any posts in the federal German government. His ideas, his knowledge of Europe are very much focused on Northwest Europe, where he comes from. He comes from the city of Aachen. He's a friend of Macron. He's a friend of, he's got strong contacts with the Netherlands. He's partly of Dutch ancestry. And we just don't know what he's going to do. And maybe he himself doesn't know what he's going to do. Is he going to continue with the policy that the Germans have of resisting put pressure for Eurobonds and joint taxation and joint militaries and converting the EU into a super state? Or is he going to crumble before Macron and the integrationists and agree to the kind of things that they want, even though if he does do that, I predict that there will be before very long a powerful backlash in Germany. And if there is that kind of step, how will people in north of Europe begin to respond? Already we see parts of the states in northern Europe starting to get increasingly restless. We've also seen that in Hungary and Poland, there are governments which are already hostile to the integrationist project within the EU. There are lots of questions, unanswered questions, about how this is going to work out in the future. My own guess is that over the course of 2021, 2022, we are going to see a major push by the integrationists to try to drive forward a European unification with the Commission firmly in control. I also predict that it will hit the buffers, and that there will come a point where the Northern Europeans, or at least the publics in Northern Europe, will say enough. And I think they have the electoral power and the political power to block it. And at that moment, we will see a crisis in the Union, in the European Union, the like of which we've not seen at any time since it was first founded in 1960. But anything could happen. We shall see. We shall be keeping track of it and reporting on it and commenting about it all the time on the Duran, as we have always done.
All right, let's bring in, we have some people queued up to call. Let's bring in Zahir. Zahir, are you ready? I'm going to add you to the stream.
Hear me?
Yes, hear you.
Hey, good first time caller, and hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
We hear you.
Okay, I got 3 questions. I'll be as fast as I can. I wanted to talk about, given the mess that Washington is going right now with Biden and all that, the European Union, why are they like picking conflict with Russia again with over Navalny and all that? First, now I heard that they're reviewing the Sputnik vaccine. Are they gonna order it or not? Like, what's going on? Why are they keep picking, scuffle with Moscow? They need Moscow right now.
They need Moscow right now. All right. Thank you, Zahir, for that question, Alexander. They need Moscow. Why are they picking a fight with Moscow all the time?
Well, that is an excellent question. And if we go back a few years, a short time, if we can just go back a little time to, of course, what Donald Trump was saying. I mean, he and some of the people around him, like Steve Bannon, for example, were saying, well, why are we picking a fight with Moscow at the end of the day? They're not a threat to us. The Russians aren't really a danger to us. They're not a major adversary. China is. Surely our right and proper policy is to try and become, if not friends with the Russians, at least to reach a good modus vivendi with them, so that we can concentrate on the country that is the real challenge, which is China. That's what some people are saying. And of course, there are other people, the real realists, who are saying, well, we shouldn't really pick fights with anybody. People like Ron Paul, for example. We should focus instead on developing our own country and building up and sorting out its many problems. In other words, the real American firsters, if I can put it like that. Well, the Democrats are not like that. And I think the basic reason is there's 2 reasons. Firstly, there is an ideological one. I mean, I think that people like Blinken, people like Barack Obama, people like that see in Russia a roadblock to this great project they have for a globalist world. Russia rejects it. Russia is also a European country. It's so easy to fit Russia into the whole culture war, identity politics frame that so many of these people seem to have about this. So, I mean, you get the sense that there's much hostility towards the Russians because it's a fairly conservative place in a certain way. And I mean, they project onto Russia all those things. So they have all of these issues with Russia. And of course, beyond that, there are the great geostrategists, the people with the Washington think tanks, the disciples of Zbigniew Brzezinski, the disciples of Mackinder, the British geopolitician, who say to themselves, well, how are we going to deal with China? We're going to deal with China by breaking up Russia, gaining control of its natural resources, taking charge of its government, and isolating and encircling China in that way, again, as part of our great march towards achieving this great, globalist order, that we have in mind, which is, of course, if you read Blinken's speech, that's essentially what he's talking about. When he talks about democracy promotion, that is what he means. So they get themselves into these struggles with the Russians, in part because of these ideological things. I also think there is something else, which is, of course, that the Democrats, over the last 4 or 5 years, have built up Russia as this bogey, and they've also conflated Russia with that bad orange man, Donald Trump. So constantly hitting at Russia in that kind of way is one way that they're able to keep this very unruly and disorganized coalition, which is the Democrat Party coalition, together. And I think that's partly what it's all about. It's the thing that is able to unite Hillary Clinton with, well, I don't know, Bernie and Alexandra, Ocasio-Cortez and all those sort of people. So you keep them all together by talking about Russia all the time. And last but not least, if you have problems, if there's a big hack, for example, or an election goes wrong somewhere in the world, or people are, picking up on things on the internet which you don't want them to, well, Russia is the scarecrow. You can say that it's all the Russians who are responsible. It's their, wicked information exercises which are misleading people, and they shouldn't listen to that, and they shouldn't attend to those sort of things. And you can then use Russia as an excuse to do all of these other things. So I think a lot of it ultimately is I think, borderline fantastical, even irrational. It's, ideas about Russia as a sort of ideological adversary, projections upon Russia of all sorts of concerns, and geopolitical ideas that you want to do. And at the same time, it's a good way of keeping the Democrat Party coalition together and holding together its base by building the Russians up as this threat, even though in reality, Russia isn't any sort of threat to the United States at all.
All right, so here, was that a good reply?
Yes, and I got one more thing. Russia, all the sanctions have been put on Russia, right? Russia has its foreign exchange, like money in U.S. Stocks and EU stocks. Why not remove those? Like, pull it back.
Yes, I'm afraid I didn't quite get all of that.
Okay, hold on.
You're a bit distorted.
Sorry, Russia has put its foreign exchange money, right, in U.S. stocks, I guess, and in EU stocks. Why not Russia should pull it out, like bring those money back home?
Pull the money back home.
Absolutely. And of course, this is the other thing. I mean, we don't tend to think of Russia as an economic challenge to the US because, of course, I mean, it isn't in any significant sense. And yet in a kind of funny way it is, because of course they are building up their foreign reserves. They have separated now almost entirely their banking system from that of the Western world. They are running their economy in ways that is both, interestingly, free market and capitalistic, but not integrated into the globalist system that the United States represents. And of course, this is something, given that Russia is a big country, that is unacceptable if you are a globalist in Washington. You can't have a huge country like Russia that has all these enormous natural resources, all these very large foreign exchange reserves, all this independent banking system, all this technology. You can't have it opting out of the globalist order, because if it does that, well, it ceases to be a globalist order anymore. So there are all of these angers and resentments and hostility to Russia, which are in part driven by this. But I have to make one important point. One of the reasons why the Russians have taken all these steps, why they're building up all those foreign reserves, why they are selling dollars and buying gold, why they are seeking self-sufficiency through import substitution programs, why they made food security so important, why they've acted in this very way that the Washington globalists are so hostile to, is because the Russians perceive a threat to themselves from the United States and from the West. They talk about this now all the time. If you'd gone back 20 years to the early years of Putin's presidency, at that time, the Russians and Putin were not talking about separating themselves from the United States and creating their own banking system and building up their foreign exchange reserves and doing all of those things. On the contrary, they were looking to integrate themselves into the international economy. They lifted all the barriers. They joined the World Trade Organization. They made their currency convertible. They encouraged foreign direct investment. They did all of these things. And then, of course, they realized that that comes with an unacceptable price, because the United States was using all these steps the Russians were taking in order to put pressure on the Russians to do things that the Russians saw as against their own interests. And of course, the Russians changed course. But it was, in a way, what's happened now in Russia is a product of American decisions and policies. They have pushed Russia away. And from where Russia very much wanted to be a partner, and by the way, always accepting that it would be a junior partner, because the Russians never aspired to dethrone the United States after the Cold War as, the world's leading power. Where Russia wanted to be a partner, they've made it into an adversary, which is an extraordinary failure of policy at multiple levels.
All right, Zahir, thank you very much for your call.
Thank you.
Take care. Let's bring in Alex. Alex, you're up next. I'm adding you to the stream. Alex.
Hello, good afternoon, gentlemen. Am I audible? Perfectly
Yes.
fine and well?
Very
Yes, you
audible.
are.
Very
How are you
audible.
Excellent.
Yes, you are.
I'll be as brief as I possibly can, gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to the stream. I intermittently watch your show, as well as read the articles that you put out, as well as put them across Telegram. I manage multiple communities on Telegram. I'm the director of the Intel Ops Unit for the Reality Report independent media news conglomerate. Love your work, gentlemen. Do please keep it up consistently, and worry not the black pill void that is American politics. It'll sort itself out. But gentlemen, I came here today because I want to talk about one thing specifically. Macro-scale ideological warfare, demoralization, and victory conditions. If we are to put the world into two, broadly speaking, camps, not necessarily in this scenario left or right, but cringe effeminacy and weak men pushing for equality and victimhood ethics - cult mentality versus hierarchy, patriotism, let's say patriarchy, stoicism, and masculinity in general. Would you agree that the ideological macro-scale warfare going on presently, if we are to turn it into effeminacy versus masculinity, which side will be the victor in the macro scale, not necessarily culture war, but gene war that will inevitably follow Marxist victimhood ethics cult mentality? I would like your digested insights and thoughts in the gene war aspect of the culture wars, gentlemen. I can rephrase if need be, gentlemen.
Well, I think the first thing to say is that there is very much an ongoing culture war in the United States. And if you're talking about the United States at the moment, there is no doubt at all which side it seems to me is winning or has been winning up to now. You only have to look at the policies that the Biden administration has been following since it came to office.
Transgenderism and children, sir. Well, indeed, it is quite eyebrow-raising.
Absolutely. And of course, this is also true in Europe too. There's been criticisms now in Germany, by the way, but you can see this is the trend within Western societies. If you are talking about the wider world of geopolitics, the various great blocs, the Chinese, Russian bloc, if you like, other places around the world, I don't think they see themselves as being involved in a culture war. Actually, I think that they look at the culture wars in the West, and what they say to themselves is, we don't want to have anything to do with this. This has nothing to do with us. We are much more conservative, much more traditional societies. We're not by any means intolerant or, societies, but we have our own, feelings. We don't want to be part of all of this, and we are going to build our societies upon our traditional values as we have always done. The problem is that there are some people in the West who find it impossible to accept that, and you have all these pressures on these countries that I'm talking about, especially, we were talking about Russia before, we can talk about Russia now. All these pressures to the Russians and other countries like that to conform and to basically become drawn in to these Western culture wars.
With the case of Russia, sir, and I believe it's the Eastern Bloc of Europe, the Visegrad, they are pushing for religious, cultural, and spiritual security laws that assert and affirm their nationhood, their sovereignty, their in-group preferences, and so forth. How do you have any insights on how the westernmost part of Europe, rather than the Visegrad, specifically the United Kingdom, France, and so forth, might be able to not necessarily adopt the exact same type of cultural, spiritual, religious security laws, but have something in place that at the very least acts and serves as a bulwark against Marxist deconstructivism of nationhood? Quite frankly, the Eastern Bloc of Europe are knowledgeable of cultural nationhood deconstruction because they have undergone the Bolshevik tendencies of the prior century that I won't get into too much detail on. But this scar of Bolshevik cultural deconstructivism, the Eastern Bloc of Europe are more prepared against cultural deconstructivists compared to the Western Bloc of Europe, because they have lived through cultural, religious, sovereignty deconstruction by rabid Marxists. Your thoughts on this, if possible?
Alexander, can I just interject here and just say maybe a good contrast? What comes to mind listening to Alex is take Hungary on one side and take Ireland on the other side.
Yeah.
Hungary, Eastern Europe, Ireland, the closest to the U.S. as it can be. The change in Ireland, which I've always thought of as a conservative. When I grew up, I always thought of Ireland as a conservative, religious country. The changes in the last, 4 or 5 years has been, just left all the way and, don't pass go. Just keep on going. I mean, and then you look at Hungary. I mean, I think of listening to Alex. I think of those two countries. I mean, you're talking complete polar opposites.
It's a good disparity to discern the differences between the two, because the trajectory that they're going on, both politically, culturally, yes, indeed. But the problem is that the acceptability of color revolutionary assets in government, in media, etc. How do we ensure that the West does not fall into, shall we say, intellectual impoverished standards because of Marxist semi-theological reasoning? As far as I can tell, gentlemen, the geopolitical crisis of the present age is one of Marxist emotional blackmail and victimhood cult mentality and ethics on the one hand, versus those who wish to oppose it on the other. What are the most important tools at our disposal against Marxist emotional blackmail subversion of the West, gentlemen? This will be the final question, as I don't want to take up too much time for the other panelists. Pardon.
Well, I mean, very, very, very. I mean, in relation to Eastern Europe, you're absolutely right. I mean, and there has been a major consolidation, if you like, around traditional societies, and the pressure that has been placed upon them has actually consolidated them further. I should say, I know some people from Hungary. I know lots of people from Poland, and of course I know people from Russia, and I can see that. I mean, I have seen how they've responded to the external pressures that have been placed on them from the West. Now, how is it going to change in the West itself? I have to say that all the trends in the West at the moment are in the opposite direction. And you see that with Ireland. You see that in every country. You see that in attitudes that young people have, and which they express. There's been a very interesting opinion poll, or rather survey, that's been done on attitudes in Britain and they show wide differences on these issues between young people and older people. My own view, ultimately, is that these changes that you're talking about are unsustainable, and that there will be at some point a major reaction against them.
The process of segmentary oppositions that Mr. Turley speaks of rather frequently as a point of reactionary tendencies unto common enemies. Of an indigenous group, say, example, neighborhood, right? That's what you're referring to, sir?
Well, I mean, eventually people do respond. I mean, you see this in France with the yellow vests. You see this in all kinds of ways, and there will be a reaction. But I think before we reach that point, there's a long way to go. Because I think also we're seeing a major indicator of overreach. But I think for the moment, we have to be realistic and say that if you're talking about these cultural issues, there's no doubt at all in the West who is in the ascendant. In the East, and that also includes the European East, there is growing resistance. And as economic balances change,
indeed, Poland, for example, are actively working against biometric tracking data for big tech, whereas in England, Cambridge Analytica gets off the hook. Anyway, thank you ever so much for permitting me to speak on here, gentlemen. Pardon.
You want to throw that plug?
Keep putting out the excellent content.
Alex,
till next time.
You want to give that plug to your Telegram channel again?
Yes, of course. If you would like to find more of myself as well as my media organization, it's t.me/The Reality Report on Telegram. And on Amazon, I have 2 audiobooks listed that are that I would like to very briefly plug. The first one is called Easy Meat Inside Britain's Grooming Gang Scandal by Peter McLaughlin, and the second is called Practical Idealism, the Kalergi Plan to Destroy European Peoples, written by Mr. Nikolaus Ejiro von Coudenhove-Kalergi. Thank you all very much for having me on, and I will continue watching the streams and very much enjoy them as well as post them intermittently on my channels. The digested insights that you offer are not overlooked, gentlemen. Please keep up the exquisite works. Till next time.
Thank you very much, Alex. Take care. So I'm going to bring in Zarael in a minute. Zarael, you're up next. Alexander, Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss, that's exactly what Alex is talking about. But you know what? there is a backlash in the US. If you go to, and I was watching a Mark Dice video, if you go to Amazon right now, even though eBay has banned Dr. Seuss books, he's being banned everywhere pretty much. But if you go to Amazon and you look at the marketplace, it is literally a page, and Mark Dice has a great video on it, a whole page of all the top selling books right now are all Dr. Seuss books. Every single one of them.
Well, it doesn't surprise me at all, because, as I said, a backlash is inevitably going to happen. And how long it will take for it to become politically effective, it's difficult to say, because you can never say this sort of thing. But by the way, I'm starting to hear that there's also a reaction starting to build in Germany, which is, of course, a Central European country, not always been a Western European country. It's a step away from these sort of things. So we'll see how soon the politics of this begin to play out. But they will always do. They always do.
The culture war is everywhere. Here in Cyprus, everyone is there's a big scandal here about the song that they're choosing for Eurovision, which is a song called El Diablo, and supposedly it's about the girl that's singing it's supposedly upset with her boyfriend. But when you read the lyrics, I mean, it is just man, this is like an ode to El Diablo. It really is like an ode to the devil in a way. And this is coming from an Orthodox country, and the church is like, up in ours. But why didn't you guys say anything sooner? How did you let the state television channel choose this song? But it's once again, it's that indoctrination and that propaganda, that contest like Eurovision that they use and they feed on, and they know what they're doing. So
absolutely,
have to stay vigilant.
Well, absolutely. Can I just say also the same, of course, is true in Greece. And I mean, from being a very conservative, but not, we shouldn't over stress this, but a conservative society, a religious and Christian society, it's changed.
It's changed. Greece has changed.
Very, very much.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It's not the Orthodox religious country it used to be. It used to be. That's for sure. That's for damn sure. Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, let's get to Zarael. Zarael, are you ready? Zarael, you are in the stream. Can you hear us? Zarael, are you with us, Zarael?
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, hello.
Zarael. Yes. How are you?
Good evening, gentlemen. Pardon me. I'd like to just make a quick comment to Mr. Sangmore's comments or his questions. I would like to recommend that he has a very good point. I would recommend Professor Dr. Jordan Peterson on this topic, because he has a very, very good insight when it comes to all of this new movement. Let's just put it, the transgenderism, etc., etc. And he has quite a few seminars that you can listen into. However, he also does have a very good point that it is taking taking a foothold in the geopolitical area. Pardon me, slightly cold here today. It is actually involving and influencing our cultural society on all fronts, whether it be in the Western or Eastern Hemisphere. We just see that Putin, ingrained the man and women as a family, and not man and man, woman, woman, etc., etc. So maybe a show on this topic from you guys would also be worthy to pursue. Another question from my side. I have been wondering about the statement yesterday was given by Benny Gantz, saying that Israel they are looking at a preemptive strike on Iran right now. We've heard this quite a few times before. I actually picked this up on True News last night, and it's always a lead up to. And now we know that we know that the gentleman, that President Biden and President Netanyahu do not really understand each other. But how do you guys think that this is going to turn out? And another question would be from my side. I've been hearing from German, southeast to southwest German friends of mine who we watch the sky. There is an increase of military activity with from the United States Air Force, because they're the only ones that fly Hercules, wrote Alex this morning. Is there any way to find out what's happening? Have you guys heard anything? Because this is a very seldom activity that we've seen, and you cannot track them on radar. I have been following this.
Well, let's deal with the military movements, the aircraft movements first. As I said, we received an email about this just before we did this program, and I don't know what the explanation for that is, but there has been a lot of tension on the line of control, the border between Ukraine and the two eastern breakaway republics, the Donetsk People's Republic and the Lugansk People's Republic. And there's been some talk that the Ukrainians might be contemplating some kind of offensive there, which the Russians, by the way, Putin had a discussion with some journalists recently, and he made it very clear that they would resist it. So it may be that these troop movements are in some way connected to that. The very latest information we've had from the eastern Ukraine is that this fighting has eased, but we don't know. And we simply don't know what may be contemplated in that respect and what might be prepared there. So we have to be very concerned and very wary. But of course, the Pentagon doesn't advise us about what its purposes may be. All we know is that we're now starting to get reports about these movements of aircraft from Italy to Germany, and we don't know why, and we don't know for what reason. Now, the second thing I'm going to say is that in relation to Israel and Iran, the Israelis have repeatedly talked about their plans to attack Iran. There seems to be an enormous amount of uncertainty within the Biden administration as to what exactly it's going to do with Iran. You get the sense that some people within the Biden administration want to move forward with the JCPOA and want to re-enter the JCPOA as soon as possible. Others want to use the leverage that they think the Trump-era sanctions, which were imposed upon Iran, give them to try to extract concessions from Iran. I'm not sure what is going to happen, but the concern must be that the Israelis, if they start feeling that there is a slippage in Washington on the JCPOA, may decide that they need to take action, and action rapidly against Iran. I don't think the Pentagon will welcome that. I think the Pentagon will be extremely unhappy about it. I think Joe Biden himself, to the extent that he is, of course, on top of these sort of things, would probably be unhappy about it also. So we will just see what happens. I think there will be signals perhaps sent to Israel not to do it, but with the absence of a clear leadership in Washington, a president able to make decisions, a president willing to pick up the phone and speak to Netanyahu, we can't say for certain what will happen.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. As always, great show. Have a great evening and a great weekend.
Take care, Zariel. Mm-hmm. All right, let's bring in Bomio. Bomio, you're up next. Adding you into the stream now.
Yeah.
Bomio, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I have a statement that I would like you guys to elaborate on. Over the years, what you learn from the US is that it kind of says that, hey, everybody should be like us, the USA. Yeah? But in actual, what happens is that immediately you develop your economy, you develop technologies, you start to look like the USA, then they say, oh, you are a threat. You are a threat. You see an example of China, you see an example of Russia, countries that somewhat were different to the US, and now they look like the US, and then you get this reaction, which for me as an African, is very confusing. What do you think?
Well, you're absolutely right. And by the way, no less a person than Putin made that precise comment just the other day. He was talking to a group of officials, and he said one of the paradoxes is that the United States always says that it wants people to become democratic and more like itself and more economically successful. And when they do exactly that, then it sees them as a possible adversary or challenge, and it starts to respond to them. And the problem is, I think, that this comes down very much to a certain view or set of views that have evolved in the United States over the last 30, 40 years, which is that they see the United States itself as somehow the forefront of a new civilization, which, to be very clear, is not a civilization which is really very concerned with what Americans themselves, the kind of lives they themselves lead, and which sees any challenge to the US or potential challenge to the US from other societies which develop and appear to succeed successfully as somehow opposing that mission that these people have in effect imposed upon the US. So the result is that instead of welcoming progress by other countries, they tend to oppose it. And they tend to say to themselves, if China has become richer, if Russia is getting richer, this must mean that they are threatening to displace our leadership. And that is something we can't tolerate, because our leadership is necessary in order to create this new perfect world with democracy expanded, our conception of democracy expanded and spread and established everywhere, but always and invariably under our leadership. The only way you can get US acceptance of what you do, it seems to me, is if you subordinate yourself. When I say US, I should make it very clear. I'm not talking about everybody in the US. I'm talking about the particular class of people I'm talking about. The only way you will ever get the neocons, if you like, to accept you is if you subordinate yourself totally to what the US wants. If you decide that you have independent views and independent opinions on any topics, then you cease to be a Democrat, you become a challenger. And at that point, the entire weight of the United States will be turned against you.
Yeah. Thanks for the answer. Thanks for the answer. Just one more thing, then I am off. Personally, I think from African point of view, and being an African, we are doing so well.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing for us is to enjoy what we have achieved now. It would be very nice if the US could take its riches, what it has achieved, and enjoy it instead of spending it. I don't know what they are trying to achieve in the world, but it looks like it's not working.
Bomio, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I know that, or at least you read every day that Africa is definitely in the middle of a tug of war, supposedly between China and the West. In other words, they're both trying to woo over and sway Africa into their camp, and they do it with different means. And you hear a lot about how China is investing a lot in Africa in order to influence the entire continent. How do you see the situation? Do you see, do you personally, or in your everyday life, or do you know people that see the Chinese investing in Africa and influencing Africa in a way, or do you see things mostly still tilting towards the West, depending on whichever country you are in Africa? What's your own experience in this?
I am very happy that you have asked me this question, and let me answer this as an African and as a Ghanaian. Yeah.
Okay.
Look, growing up, I am in my 50s. Growing up, it took years to get any project completed. Yeah. When I go back home these days, I see roads that are built. I see schools. I see stadiums. When I go to the villages, I see people who have televisions. They have refrigerators. These were things that 25 years ago we did not have. And the thing is that China has moved in and it's made this possible for our people. Yeah. The other thing I would say is that, look, if you look at countries or regions of the world where China has its biggest investments, it's the US, it's Europe. Why should we in Africa deny ourselves of Chinese investments? Look, China is delivering on the grounds. The thing is that our people are benefiting and they are enjoying life. Is China perfect? No, I don't think anybody is perfect. Everybody is out for his interest. But at the end of the day, we are getting something. And I think that for Africa, what is left to us is to make the best deal that we can get or we can do. And I think sometimes we don't do that good work. But yes, we need China around to do what it is doing, because I don't think Europe is coming to build our roads, a whole lot of infrastructure. I don't think just the Europeans or the Western countries will do it. Yeah. So that is my take.
That's very excellent. Can I just also say, by the way, that I completely agree with your point that the best policy for the United States, for the American people, is to focus on creating the best and optimal conditions in the United States for the American people to live their lives. An America that does that will actually, in the end, be happier and more prosperous and, paradoxically, more powerful in a true way than this project of trying to play geopolitical chess all around the world in all sorts of places, including in Africa with the Chinese, where in fact it's Africans, in my opinion, who are going to make the decisions about Africa, not China. It's not the United States. And I think the United States getting involved in these games in Africa completely misunderstands the nature of what African decisions are all about.
Alex Christoforo, just one more thing. Can I ask you a question? I know you have made mention that you are an American, yeah? My kids were also born in the US. They are an American citizens, yeah?
Yes.
What worries me most is that, look, I have built up wealth, and if I transfer it over to my children, they have to start paying taxes over something that I have built all my life. That concerns me.
Yeah.
What's your take?
They have their American passports, their citizenship.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Well,
yes, they do.
there's no way around it, to be honest. Look, I'll give a real quick background. I was born in the U.S. and I lived all my life in the U.S. The interesting thing about me, though, was that my father was a diplomat. So under American law, I do not get automatic citizenship. I do get residency, i.e. a green card, should I go live in the United States again, but I do not get automatic citizenship. Okay. But I do know many Americans who are living, for example, in Greece, not in Cyprus so much, but in Greece. And, you have FACTA laws and they have to, they're constantly tracked down as far as taxes and any income that they earn. And when you open up a bank account anywhere outside the United States, the first thing the banks will ask you is, are you an American citizen? They'll want your passport, and that's it. Whatever goes into that bank will get taxed by the U.S. So it's hard for me to give an answer. There's no real way around it, to be honest.
Yeah. Thanks very much, gentlemen.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Bomio. Take care. All right, let's bring in Brandon. Brandon, I'm going to add you into the stream. Brandon, how you doing?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Brandon.
Hey, how's it going? I never done one of these before, but I guess, so I'm studying South American, like Latin American history, and Biden is starting to kind of look like El Presidente Biden, where, back in, the 20th century, there was a bunch of dictators in Latin and South America, and, they had the army would be protecting them, they would have a bunch of executive decrees, and, that's how it looks like from I mean, just from his first few days in office. But regardless, I wanted to ask you guys about Brazil. So Brazil, not sure if you guys have heard about this, but Bolsonaro appointed a general to oversee Petrobras, if I read this right. And Petrobras, a bunch of executives or employees resigned. And this is fairly similar to a certain 19th century European country, or sorry, 20th century German country, where the means of production were taken over by military, generals. And I know that Brazil suffered under a military dictatorship from I think 1968 to 1982, 81, whatever it was. And Bolsonaro was a part of this regime. And I'm wondering if, well, Petrobras, Brazil is a fairly decent player in the oil industry. And seeing these executives resign, I'm wondering if there's a crisis brewing in Brazil, and if the Brazilian people are ready for such an exquisite or such an expansive move from from a military general taking over, quote unquote, the means of production in terms of oil, like nationalizing it. They moved away from that, and it seems Bolsonaro is bringing that back to a certain extent, or he's trying to, and that's his goal. Because he was part of that intelligentsia, or he was part of the military during those times. And I'm wondering if a crisis brews in Brazil, what over oil, I don't follow the oil markets, but what effect that would have on US, like the US and China, because I know the US overthrew the Brazilian government back then, and they installed the dictator. And I'm wondering if China is maybe learning from the US's, from that trademark policy of, taking over a country and putting a leader in that is what you call it, that has like-minded interests. So yeah, I'm just curious what you guys think.
Right.
If a crisis developed in Brazil, what effect would it have in the oil markets and around the world?
Brazil.
Right.
El Presidente Biden, Brazil.
Brazil.
All right. Thank you, Brandon, for that question.
Right. I mean, I should say Brazil is a country which I have been interested in, because, of course, Brazil is potentially one of the great powers. I mean, it's got huge resources, a young, dynamic population. It ought to be punching far more, punching far more internationally than it does. And it ought to be, I think, succeeding economically, perhaps more than it does. There's all sorts of problems in Brazil. And I'm going to say this straight away. Now, on the specific issue of Petrobras, which I've heard about also. And by the way, just to quickly, as an add in, sort of parenthesis, I think I am right in saying that Bolsonaro himself has a background as a military officer. Anyway, regardless of that, putting military people in charge of major economic enterprises is something which has happened many times in Latin American histories, certainly happened in Brazil. It's also happened in many places around the world. It happened in Egypt, for example. It rarely, scarcely ever works well, because military people are not really the best adapted people to run economic enterprises in that kind of way. It's much better to have civilian administrators run them. Now, of course, saying that, I want to make it very clear that obviously you do find people from military backgrounds who go into commerce in the West or wherever, and after a while they rise to high positions as executives in companies, and they do very well there, and they often bring with them the kind of skills that they have, that they learned whilst they were in the military, and they use them well. That's a different thing from a situation where the military as a institution, or members of the military as an institution, takes control of particular enterprises, because they don't tend to think in a commercial way. They don't have the understanding often of how businesses are run, and often they don't have the technical skills to run those businesses. Running an oil company is an extremely complex thing. And what tends to happen when they take over companies like Petrobras is that the military tends to see a company like Petrobras as a cash cow that it can then use to carry out whatever projects Brazil has. And if you know about Brazil, you will know that Brazil has a fairly significant military industrial complex. It builds all kinds of weapon systems. It's got all kinds of projects, for example, including one very ambitious one to develop nuclear powered submarines. And one does worry that what you're going to see is oil money going into directly funding these military enterprises, because that's what the military wants them to do, and that will not be good for the overall Brazilian economy. So that's the first thing I want to say about this. Now, the problem with Brazil is that it seems to me that it's got enormous potential as a country, but it has never cohered politically. You had, going all the way back, you had in the 19th century a very unstable period after the monarchy was overthrown. Then there was the dictatorship of Vargas in the 30s, which seemed to be taking Brazil in a certain direction, but then that ended. Then there was a sort of period of uncertainty afterwards. Then in the late 50s and early 60s, a period of great optimism. They built Brasilia. They were seen to be forging ahead. There were all kinds of projects. I think it was the time when they were saying, was it 20 years in 5 or whatever it was. Then there was a crisis because they overspent money, because the administration wasn't well organized. The government began to drift to the left. The United States intervened. There was the coup. The coup itself led to a military government which reproduced many of these problems. And then after the military government fell, you had a political situation in Brazil, which there have been moments when it seems that things have been going better, but they've never completely cohered at a political level. And I think that is the problem in Brazil, in the sense that you still don't have stable political civilian institutions. And that is true right across Latin America. And there are societal reasons for that, which we could talk about at great length, but probably that's outside the scope of this program. But the result of this is that when political institutions are fragile and weak, those institutions within a society that are strong and well organized or relatively organized, like the military, start to fill in the vacuum. So they start taking over enterprises, they start running oil companies, they start saying to themselves, we are the people who are going to run these things, and we're going to run them in the way that we think is right, which we perhaps believe is right for the country, but which ultimately conforms to a vision that you would expect the military as an institution to have for that country. Now, will we see a crisis in Brazil? I think probably we will. I think Brazil has been through many crises in its history. It has repeatedly come through them successfully. I'm sure it will come through whatever crisis comes in the future. And I think step by step, we are starting to see, hopefully, a point come when those political institutions in Brazil will finally cohere. We are not there yet, not by any way, but perhaps that point will eventually come. Now, there's so much more to say, and talking about Brazil and indeed all of Latin America is a topic which we could discuss for hours. And I'm deliberately avoiding discussing, the social and economic issues and the legacies from the past which exist to create these problems. But I think that Brazil is heading in the right direction. But unfortunately, it's often 2 steps forward, 1 3/4 steps back.
Yeah, no, I was just asking because I'm actually from Colombia, and and I've been studying history, and I think it was more a problem of like at the end of the day, it was more a problem that Latin America was a Spanish and Portuguese colonies versus America, which was the British, and the British treated their colonies much different than Spain and Portugal did. And I also didn't want to get into the social economic that kind of stuff, but yeah, and so because there is that age old question, is not age old, but that question is Latin America part of the West? I mean, they have Christian roots. They speak European languages. They have the resources, and the Brazil specifically has the position in the world where it could be a major power in South America.
Yeah.
But it just isn't. And so that's all I really just wanted to ask you guys. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brandon.
And by the way, Colombia, which I've never visited, I hear is an extraordinarily beautiful country, enormously diverse, culturally rich, and absolutely a place to visit.
Yeah, it's better than, I live in Wisconsin now, so it's a lot better there.
Take care, Brandon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, let's see. We've got Claude coming up next. And after Claude, we'll take Alan, Tarif, and LT Sanders. Then we have a bunch of really good super chat questions as well. So we're just getting started, guys. Claude, I'm adding you into the stream here. Claude, are you with us?
Hi, gentlemen. How are you?
How you doing? Good. How are you doing?
Big fan of the show. You guys are so humble and fun to listen to and smart. So appreciate that very much. I've got a question for you. I've got a few, but I guess I'll try to be cordial and keep it to a minimum. Have you guys noticed that there's been no world leaders that have actually made any comments about the Biden administration? It's like it's like they don't exist. There's been no visitors to the White House. It's a very strange thing that's happening right now that you don't normally see. It's almost like they know he's not the one. Is that the feeling you guys get?
They know, Brandon. I think you nailed it.
Absolutely.
Alexander. Brandon, Claude. Me and Alexander always talk about this before we do shows, that the world leaders know. I mean, they must know what's going on. Anyway, Alexander, thank you, Claude. That's a really good question. I think you answered it.
I was going to say you answered your own question, because you're absolutely right, and that's extremely insightful and astute. And it's a very weird situation.
It's very weird. I mean, I'm Canadian, so you know that Trudeau is tied to the Obama administration from way back, when he was running for prime minister. He was way behind in the polls, and then a plane landed in Ottawa from Chicago, and it was 57 of Obama's ground team that came in, and they redid his image overnight, and the polls changed, and he was elected, and he's been beholden to them since. Even his vice prime minister is married to a reporter of the New York Times that's tied to Obama. There's always a tie between these people. And so you would think that Trudeau would have been very, very welcoming of Biden, but it's the same thing. Even Trudeau has no time for Biden whatsoever. It's now granted the pipeline issue hasn't helped, but it's to me, it's been very strange. The other topic I'd like you guys, and then I'll hang up and let you guys develop this, but the situation in the Middle East. We've got Israel now with this Abraham Accords and all that. The dynamics in the Middle East have completely changed. Biden wants to reverse that. It's obvious. I don't see how how Israel and the Gulf states will allow this. I mean, with the war on energy and all that, but I'll let you guys develop on these couple of things, and I'm curious to hear your guys' opinion on this stuff. And I hope you have a great, wonderful weekend. Stay safe.
Thank you, Claude. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Claude. And you're absolutely right, because of course, I mean, undoing what most people, certainly in Israel and many people in the United States, will see as progress with the Abraham Accords is going to be almost impossible to undo. I mean, how does Biden, or rather the Biden administration, do something like that? And of course, part of the reason the Abraham Accords happened, one feels, is because the United States appeared to be taking a very strong position against Iran, which is the country which these countries, the Gulf states, are so hostile to. So if they start to see that the United States is actually moving towards Iran, then they're going to become very concerned, and they're going to say, well, we made all these agreements with Israel and all the rest, and maybe we will stick by them because they're in our interests anyway. But having said that, we received assurances, and we just don't feel that the United States is honoring those assurances. So I don't quite know myself how that's going to work. And I do get the sense that the Biden administration really doesn't have very much of a grasp of the kind of problems it's getting itself into. I read an extraordinary article, very interesting article in the Times of London, which claimed to have sources within the Biden administration, and which said that the Biden people have taken over this idea that Barack Obama had of trying to create a situation where both Iran and Saudi Arabia, these two great powers, these two great regional powers on each side of the Gulf, somehow are taught to behave themselves and keep themselves in some kind of balance. And that will then free the United States, supposedly, to concentrate on its internal problems and also its competition with China and Russia. And I have to say, if that is the thinking, then it just proves to me how completely disconnected from reality these people are. Because if you try and balance Saudi Arabia and Iran in that kind of way, if you think you can do that, then you are completely don't understand the Middle East. You can't do it with these sort of countries. They have, to put it mildly, ideas of their own about each other, ideas about their own regional policies. There is no conceivable way you can sort of house tame them and set them off against each other and control them and create some kind of stability in that sort of way. It's a totally unrealistic foreign policy, a Middle East policy. And it doesn't surprise me, it wouldn't surprise me at all if it was by Obama's idea. But if Biden has inherited it and is what he's trying to do, and by the way, it's supposedly the reason why he has all these issues with MBS, because the MBS is supposedly not pliable in the way that Biden wants, or the Biden people want, so they want to replace him with somebody who would be supposedly more amenable to them. If that's what they want to do, then inevitably and before very long, they will have a disaster in the Middle East on their hands. Remember, Obama did author disasters in the Middle East. He came in as the president, very much like the Biden people are saying now, who said that he's going to disengage from the Middle East. He was going to end the forever wars. He played instead all sorts of complicated games in the Middle East. They ended up with a collapse in Libya, the rise of ISIS, and the war in Syria, and a worse situation in the Middle East than the one which he inherited, which is saying a great deal. So I think you're absolutely right. I think it's impossible to undo these things, and it will be incredibly reckless and very foolish to try. But these people in Washington, as Alex has said many times in other programs we've done, they don't have a reverse gear, and they think that they are much cleverer than they really are.
All right, Alan, we're going to bring you into the live stream. Claude, if you're still listening, we're going to have a video up tomorrow on Biden as well. And we actually mentioned Kamala's telephone call with Trudeau. And there is no doubt that after that telephone call, Trudeau, even though he's part of the Obama neoliberal rat pack that I like to call them, the Obama, Renzi, Cameron, Trudeau, Merkel, that team that they had in place way back when, I'm positive that Trudeau was insulted at the fact that he had to talk to Kamala and not Joe Biden.
Well,
So there's no doubt about that. Anyway, let's bring in Alan Watson. Alan, you are in the stream.
Can you hear me,
us?
guys?
Yes, we can,
Yes,
Alan.
clearly.
How you doing?
Great. It's great to see you. And those last 2 or 3 live questions were really good. To follow on a bit from what Clyde just said, the new administration in the United States appears to be very indecisive. And what worries me, as Biden might do in an El Presidente style, is try to assert himself internationally and do something very rash. That it appears that's what you were frightened of just as much as everybody else. That's the first thing. Second thing is, thanks to all those lovely people who talked to me on the stream. You've got some great people out there, no doubt about it. The second thing is, with the problems with Northern Ireland and Scotland, I always feel that the EU has always had a desire to break up the UK and make it federalist so as to fit in more to their ideas of what a federalist EU should be like, and again to neuter the power of the British Parliament. I've got lots of other things, but I'll leave it there. Thanks very much. Great to see you. Lovely people. Valier, Spartan Warrior Queen, Zariel. They're great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Alan. Take care.
Can I just say something, a few things about that? Because, of course, I've just done a program for my channel. It's not yet up, but it will be soon, about these latest threats that the EU is making to bring a legal case against Britain because of the way the British supposedly or allegedly are doing some absolutely monstrous and terrible and shocking thing. They're actually sending food to supermarkets, British supermarkets, to Northern Ireland, which is, of course, part of the United Kingdom. And the EU thinks this is outrageous, and they're going to bring a case against Britain because of that, because they see that as somehow going against the protocol that was agreed by the EU and Britain as part of Britain's Brexit. And they also see it supposedly as threatening the EU's single market. I mean, I find it absolutely, deranged that people in the EU could seriously be talking in this bizarre way about bringing legal cases, but there we are. And I think, by the way, this point about the EU wanting, if not exactly the breakup of the United Kingdom, up to the point when Britain was a member state of the of the EU, at least weakening the central government in London, is true, in the sense that I don't think it's just Britain that was singled out. I think the EU generally has this policy because, from their point of view, they see the biggest potential threat to the, if you like, integrity of the EU system as sovereign governments. So what they like to do is to build up regional governments, and in order to weaken the state governments, the sovereign governments, that might be the ones that might challenge the EU centrally. And that has actually led to a rise in regionalism and local nationalisms right across the EU. The odd thing is, it doesn't always work out the way the EU wants it to. So we've seen in Lombardy, for example, how the Northern League, which rose up in Lombardy, and there's a similar, and also in Veneto, has actually developed into an anti-EU direction, or had until very recently. Whilst the rise of Catalonia in Spain, the issue in Catalonia in Spain, has actually weakened a state, Spain, which is a completely loyal state to the EU. So we see that it's not always worked out quite the way that the EU wanted, but it certainly worked like that in Britain. It was very interesting to see that when there was the Brexit referendum, England, which, to be very clear, is where 80% of the population of Britain, of the United Kingdom of Britain, England voted to leave. But the regional territories, the Kingdom of Scotland, Principality of Wales, Northern Ireland, they voted to remain because from their point of view, they were quite happy to be receiving direct grants and support from the EU centrally, and that they felt made them less dependent on London. Now, what's happening, in my opinion, is that that dynamic is now shifting. Britain has left the EU. These regional governments within the United Kingdom, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, they don't have that direct line to Brussels that they did anymore. Now, over time, if the United Kingdom holds together and goes through this period that we're going to see over the next few years, that might cause it to reintegrate more closely again, because then people in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland will say, well, Britain, England, this is the place which we really do most of our trade and our work with. That's the place where we need to have a voice. We need, therefore, to re-emphasize the sort of union connection, and that means sending our MPs and our people to London to speak up for us there. So it might in time cause a reintegration. But in the meantime, what we're seeing is these regional governments are trying to assert themselves against London, and because they no longer have the EU connection, they're becoming more, shall we say, trenchant or even aggressive about it. So we see talk about Scottish independence referendum. We see all these issues with Northern Ireland. We see also Wales starting to assert itself in all sorts of ways. I think this could be a temporary phenomenon, but we shall see. Undoubtedly, the EU is to some extent sympathetic to all of this, in the sense that if Scotland were to break away from Britain, I'm not sure that they would actually welcome it with open arms into the EU. Spain, by the way, is implacably opposed because of the Catalonia issue, but they would not be sorry to see Britain weakened, and that undoubtedly is a factor that exists.
All right. Thank you very much, Alan, for that question. Let's bring in Tarif Simon. Tarif, I'm going to add you to the stream. Tarif, are you there?
How y'all doing, gentlemen? It's morning where I'm at right now. I'm calling from New Orleans, Louisiana.
Awesome.
I
Awesome
like
city.
listen. Thank you. You need to come back down here again. Maybe
Yeah,
I could some gumbo.
I would love to be in New Orleans. I love that city.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm a frequent listener to y'all. So I call into Fault Lines Radio. Right now it's run by Jamal Thomas and Shane Stranahan, and also calling into the backstory with Lee Stranahan and John Kerr. And I give my political views and on what I think was going on. So this morning I was trying to figure out what I was going to talk about. Before I go into it, I like to say Free Julian Assange. They got a petition going on right now for him on change.org. I like to say that. Okay, I called in this morning because I saw a tweet that was tweeted out by Gwen Greenwald, and it was dealing with this QAnon stuff. And I'm gonna go ahead and explain about that. And my other comment I want to talk about Pfizer too, if you don't mind. Yeah. Okay, so these journalists that's in MSM mainstream media is pushing this, is tying politicians and mega people or conservative people to either QAnon / white militia / crazy militia groups that want to basically overturn the November 3rd election. And they're trying to say by Trump saying that the election need to be ordered is something similar to as a conspiracy theory that's leading to violence and is tied to QAnon. And the media is doing more damage by tying people to QAnon, where it's fracturing the society. They're trying to keep people on the right heads down low, keep them from talking about looking at the vote count. They're trying to like bastardize people by saying that they're conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
That is dangerous because
Yeah.
when I was growing up, I like to talk to people from different countries. And when I went to Delgado in New Orleans, I came across this dude that was from Uganda, Rwanda, and he was a Tutsi. And I said, "Man, what's going on with your people? What's happening there?" He told me how it started. And it was two European nations that played the Hutus against the Tutsis. And I was dealing with the gold and the diamonds that was in that region. And how you say the Hutus was basically saying, "Hey, go out and harm your neighbor every single day on a newscast," right? And it got to a point where people basically lost their mind and they started harming their own neighbors, and that wasn't right. So when I remember that guy told me this, I'm seeing the MSM doing this, basically something similar to what he told me. I think that's what the country is headed to. I don't want to say it, but we're going to become so fractured, we might lead to God forbid, a civil war or a low-scale civil war.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with this MSM. So we need a balance. We need a balance with the 230 law that need to be reformed, not just thrown out, but it need to be reformed. And also, my last comment is dealing with Pfizer. Pfizer is acting like a extension of the Pentagon and CIA. I was watching this news site called World is One News out of India. It's like a CNN, but better. I'm gonna share the link with y'all in your comment section and also in your Discord. And basically, I come to find out Pfizer was telling Brazil and Argentina to change their laws where if they get sued for their vaccine causing ailments, that they have to pay for it. The country have to pay the lawsuit. And they also was telling Brazil and Argentina, look, put your embassies, your military base, and your bank assets up for collateral. So Pfizer won't get sued. The country gets sued. So I couldn't believe that. So I'm gonna share a link with y'all so y'all can go over that and look at what this woman talking about dealing with Pfizer. But it's unbelievable, what's going on in this world. So yeah, that's all I want to say.
Yeah. When you refer to Pfizer, do you mean the Pfizer court?
No, the pharmaceutical company.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I misunderstood. Yes. Now I understand.
But they're doing the same in Europe. They do the same in Europe. Yeah.
Absolutely. I understand that completely. And by the way, I should say I completely agree with all the points that you made. Obviously, I agree, but all the points you made about the controls of the media and all these banned and prohibited subjects. We have to be very careful. I mean, that's a sign of how we have to be very careful what we say, even in response to your very interesting and astute and correct comments. But I absolutely agree. I think it's also completely un-American. I think it goes completely contrary to the intentions of the founders who drafted the Constitution. I don't think it's compatible with the First Amendment to the Constitution. And I think it is having all the bad effects politically that you say, because it is creating partisanship, and not just partisanship, but also hostility and anger between Americans in ways that never existed before, at least not since the Civil War. Americans have often disagreed with each other. Sometimes they've disagreed with each other strongly and often about political issues, but they were always able in the end, because they had these institutions that the Constitution provided, because they had all these freedom of speech protections that the Constitution provided and the American system provided. They were always, in the end, able to resolve those things. If that is taken away, then that ability to resolve those kind of problems gradually disappears. and only the anger is left. And that is an extremely dangerous thing. Now, you talked about, all sorts of possibilities. I absolutely hope and pray that we see no outburst of violence. I think that would be a disaster for the United States, as it would be a disaster for any country. I don't personally think it's going to happen, because I think ultimately the Constitution and the political system of the United States are strong enough to resist these things. I think they are being tested like they have never been tested before. And I think that the conservative people, the Trump people, are the most law-abiding people overall in the United States. They're the patriotic people, and all this talk about militias that I've been hearing about for decades. I have to say, I have come quickly to the view that this is a myth, and that these militias, as they're talked about, don't exist to anything like the extent that they're claimed to exist. And of course, what may happen from time to time is that people come together and they do target practice or whatever it is people do, and they get called militias, and all kinds of sinister intentions are attributed to them, which they absolutely do not have. So I want to make that very clear. I agree completely with your points about the dangers of prohibiting free and open discussion and circulation of ideas. I believe that's what's made America stable. I think it's what's made America strong. I think doing away with that is wrong, and it's going to create huge problems. And I think that conservative people in the United States are patriotic and law-abiding, and all this talk about militias is largely wrong and a fantasy. And I was very troubled indeed, to hear no less a person than the director of the FBI giving or appearing to give credence to some of these dangerous and reckless claims, which I don't believe have any reality and form no part of the United States, which I recognize. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, sir, you did. I also like to say they had a judge that ruled that in Arizona that people can go in, the politicians go in and have a recount with 2.1 million ballots and also audit the voting machines. So I'm curious about that, what's going to happen, because if just say if it don't flip the state to Trump, but if they find out in it, if it's 10,000 votes or 40 or 50,000 votes, then I can say, well, Trump was right, and we was right that something actually went on with those voting machines, on with those ballots. And also, I served in the military. These white guys I knew, some of them believe in buying a whole bunch of weapons and also ammunition. Okay, but they wasn't militia, like you said. It wasn't militia. It was about, they just had a hobby of buying guns. But if you constantly pushing these people up against a wall, gaslighting them, saying that they're the enemy, then what's going to happen is they're going to create an enemy out of these people. All right. And let me tell you something. I served in the military. I had a federal job. I worked on these jobs with these people. They're good people, but at the same time, you don't want to make half the U.S. citizenry into the enemy. Absolutely. Because you're not going to win that. And I don't care if they passed Patriot Act 3 and 4 and 5 or Patriot 1000. That paperwork ain't going to be nothing when you have these dudes that living in Tennessee and West Virginia on to a T, and they're going to say, and they're going to be deputized by the sheriff. So, and that'd be it for the United States. So I agree that the Constitution need to be fortified. It need to be. I don't want no craziness happening in this country. I believe in nonviolence. I believe in peace. But something got to be done with this lopsidedness of how they labeling these people as militia, which is dangerous. And I think it should be taken to court.
I entirely agree. I think that's entirely. As I said, I don't believe that there's any reality to this claim. And as I said, it is not the reality of the United States, which I recognize. And I completely agree with you on this.
Thank you, sir. And free Julian Assange, and long live the planet, and stay non-violent and peaceful. Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you, Tarif, for your question. Take care.
Yes.
All right, let's bring in LT Sanders. And we got LT Sanders and Madeline, and then we'll go to Super Chats. LT Sanders, I'm bringing you in.
Hi.
Are you with us? Can you hear us? Yes, we hear you.
Hey, Alexander and the Duran followers. I just want to make this a call of gratitude. I think it's an exceptional program. I appreciate your critical thought. You helped me with my critical thought. I think a lot of how I perceive politics are aligned with what you say, so I thank you for that. You have a great moral compass, despite everything that's going on around the world. American living in Germany. I am a proud American, I must say that. And I'm just very years ago, found your channel. It's funny, this is the last thing I want to say. Whenever I see my little tick go up, my job, I work from home, I work for myself, and I see that little tick that, you've got a notification, you guys have posted something, I literally stop whatever I'm doing, try to make time immediately with like 10 minutes or 20 minutes, because I feel like I want to be on the forefront of what you said. And I find you, during this pandemic, you've been like a friend to me, a really good friend, because you've given a lot of good information, you've given great guidance, and I like your passion. I appreciate your passion. So this was just, like I said, a call of gratitude, and thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And I look forward to your growth. I appreciate, even the new formats and the additional channels. All these things are great. I'm glad that you're tapping into all this technology and you're not depending on YouTube. All right. So thanks so much.
Thank you. You said you're in Germany.
Yep, I'm in Germany.
How are things in Germany right now?
Yeah, so I'm going to be candid. I live here in Frankfurt, and I think that people are tired. We're very tired. I don't think, most Germans and the Europeans that live here, they try to play the game. We smile, but most people are not wearing those masks. I'm so sorry. I just have to be honest. And I'm one of those. I'm sorry, I'm a healthy person. Why am I putting a mask on?
Yeah.
But they're respectful. I think that, they're ready to take this Impfstoff. That's what we call it, a vaccine. They're ready to do that. But also, I think, I was walking through my apartment today and I was thinking, I wonder if the government if Germany's government is just being very careful, because that's how Germany, like I said, I'm an American, but I've been living here over 3 years, and my friends German, they often think that this is just a careful measure, like Germany's watching all the other countries just to see how the vaccines are behaving and how people, how they're going to react. I have several people in my neighborhood, they're very excited that getting ready to receive the vaccine, or that their family members are getting ready to receive the vaccine. Honestly, I don't want to look at it as a savior. I absolutely do not want to look at a vaccine as a savior. And I'll leave that comment as far as that, because I'm not against, but I'm not for the vaccine. But I'll say this, and you both live in Europe or in UK, people are getting so restless, they want to be outside.
Yeah.
They don't have a problem with, we call it Abstand, and that's like that distancing. People don't have a problem. I was standing at the book, we call it the Busha shop, where you can get free books. We're like all on top of each other. I think we're just like, it's been around for so long. Come on, please, 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 just let us be normal again, right? Just let us be normal.
Yes.
But other than that, I see good spirits. I see people with good spirits about it, but I think they're very tired. If you get someone in a corner, they will tell you how tired they are. Yeah. And also they think it's political as well. There's a lot of politics. Yeah, they think this is very political, and they're starting now to give more of their perspectives. People are speaking out a little bit more, and I like that. So.
Well, can I first of all thank you very much for your very kind and warm words about us, which were wonderful.
You are more than welcome.
And can I also say thank you also for your insights about Germany. Germany, the mood there sounds very similar to the mood in Britain. And
Yeah.
welcome to our program, and we look forward to hearing from you again. And thank you again for all the warm things you said. That makes us want to do programs like this, where we know
That's
that there are
exactly
people
the
like
reason
you.
why I wanted to say
Yeah.
this. I need you, and I had a bad year, financially with my business, but this year is turning around, so I'll be able to be a little bit more financial with you guys. But I
Yeah.
needed to say that just to cover
Yeah.
for the time that I've not been able to kind of support you, because you should have support. Definitely should have support, because you are a shining light. But yeah, this is the reason why I gave you that. I need you to keep going. I need that energy, I need to talk to you when you're on and you're giving all your feedback of what's going on. I need to hear that, laugh, all that good stuff. So thanks.
Thank you.
Well, thank you
very
so
much.
much.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
be well. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah, people are getting tired, Alexander. Fatigue is
Well,
setting in all over.
Absolutely.
I agree
All
with
over.
that.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. That's entirely true. I mean, I can see that with people I know. I mean, back in this time last year when it was all starting, people were they would say, we'll do it. We'll rally round. We'll observe.
We're way past rallying around. We are
Absolutely.
way past rallying around.
People are very
And you know
tired.
what? And I'm going to say this. And Madeline, you're up next. I'm going to say this. Once again, and this is to the credit of the United States. Once again, I think it is the people in those red states, and it is once again the American spirit that I think is going to be a turning point to force even Europe to start opening up ASAP. I think those red states are wow. What they have done by just getting rid of all this stuff and opening up, I think is a game changer. And that's the American spirit that I grew up with, and that's the American spirit that I'm just so attracted to. And I think it's a game changer. That's my opinion for Europe as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyway. All right, Madeline, you're coming into the stream. Madeline, are you with us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Madeline.
Clearly.
Welcome.
Okay. Well, hello, firstly, to you and to all my friends who are listening, wherever you are. Thank you very much. There are two questions that I have. The first, and I'm going to explain each one in little tiny bits so that people can understand. The first is that I really feel that now that we've gone past the need for endless wars, we've moved beyond that. We need to focus on what our next step is. And one of the things, here's point one, is that we need to leave the planet in a better condition than we inherited it. We only have one planet, we all live on it, so let's look after it. The second point is, I believe that we should all work together as a planet to give every living person Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For those of you who don't understand Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it begins with physiological needs at the very lowest level, that's food and shelter. It goes on to safety needs, that's personal security and health, things like that. Then it goes on to social needs like love and belonging. And finally, it ends up with self-actualization. So those are the two things that we really need to focus upon: leaving the planet in a better condition than we found it, and trying to give everybody Maslow's hierarchy of needs, just as a kind of a base level for everybody. And the question is, how can we achieve that?
Well, a very, very good question. Very, very good question. Now, can I just say, I think that you partly answered your question at the very start when you talked about getting past the forever wars, because obviously none of those things are possible if we are constantly in a state of war somewhere. If we're going to start, focusing on wars in places like Libya and Syria and creating, all kinds of problems there, then we're not going to have the time to sort out all those needs that you mentioned. On the contrary, we're going to actually make our problems worse and make it more difficult much more difficult to fulfill those needs. One of the points that I make many times to many people who are, interested in all kinds of, movements of, improvement and betterment and ecological betterment too, because you mentioned the planet, is that ultimately the most important issue of all is war and peace. You can achieve many things with peace, but with war makes all that impossible. Now, sometimes there are wars of need, but wars of choice, which is what we're talking about when we have forever wars, those are abhorrent and we should never engage with them. If somebody attacks us, then we have to defend ourselves. But we should not do what we were once, or American people were once warned against by, I think it was John Adams. Go abroad looking for monsters to slay. Because if we start doing that, we will create monsters amongst ourselves. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Now, the other thing I want to say is that if we're going to achieve all of these objectives that you said, which are absolutely proper and worthwhile objectives, we need to be very focused first and foremost on strengthening our own institutions, our own democratic and civilian institutions, because ultimately what we're talking about are needs that are receptive to ourselves, and we can only do that if we have governments and institutions and political entities that which we can hold to account. We also need to have proper and open discussion with each other, not constantly trying to prohibit words and people's thinking and ban ideas and do all of those sort of things, which are completely counterproductive to that kind of objective. And we also need to understand that some of these very technocratic solutions, which we have been hearing so much about, which are inimical to these ideas of democracy and social development, which you've been discussing. These technocratic concepts, fourth industrial revolution and all that, are actually completely counterproductive. That is not, in fact, not just counterproductive, they are ultimately hostile to those very objectives that you are discussing. People need peace. They need time to sort out their institutions. They need time to develop their educational levels, to articulate their feelings, to sort out the problems that they have, and imposing solutions on them from above is the opposite of what we need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
I'll
you.
go
Take
now.
care. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for your question. And please join us again in future programs.
Yep. All right. Great question. Great calls. Let's get to some super chats. Alexander, we got a lot of super chats to cover. Let's see here. Spartan Warrior Queen, thank you as always. Guys, hit that like, smash that like. Where are we with likes? Oh, we're over 1,000. Awesome. Very cool. Thank you, everybody, for all your support, for all your help. We really, really appreciate it. We are working hard for everybody so we can get the news out there as best we can. We got the Duran channel. We got Alexander's channel. We got my channel. We got the Duran call-in channel. We're doing little Duran shorts now, which is a new YouTube thing, videos under a minute. And it's been a real fun editing job on for me to do those shorts. So we're just trying to get a lot of news out to everybody. We have a super chat from M. Salim, which says, afternoon, guys, from Canvey Island, UK. Canvey Island, UK. Alexander, do you know Canvey Island?
No, I'm not sure I do, but anyway.
Canvey. Canvey.
No, I don't. But, you know, Britain, with the British Isles, there's lots of places like that. And I should also say that there are parts of Britain which are inland, which are actually called islands because, of course, the way the sea moves around and the land changes. So anyway, let's hear.
All right. Thank you for that super chat from Mark Hewitt £5 super chat. CPAC showed that most of the future talent is in the GOP. Is there anyone amongst the younger Democrats that you recognize as being talented? Absolutely. Absolutely. Her name is AOC. Alexander, is there anyone in the Democrat Party who you see as up and coming?
No, is the short answer. I mean, I don't know whether Tulsi Gabbard is still there, but I mean,
No,
even
she's not.
I think she's left, hasn't she? But I mean, I have to say, even she, I mean, she went off and supported Biden. So I mean, the answer is no. I don't.
Yeah, she supported, but to her credrit, she was.
Yeah.
The Democrat Party really treated her poorly.
Absolutely,
and not being nice.
No,
my choice of words.
Absolutely correct. And I have to say, no, I don't see anybody. And given the way the Democratic Party is now organized, I have to say, I really can't imagine anybody who I would probably look up to and say, you know, they're you know, somebody with potential. I can't really imagine how they could exist and survive in a party like that. That's not a, you know, point about politics. People have different political views, and I can find them very impressive. You know, they may be left, they may be right, I might not agree with them, but I can say to myself, well, there's somebody who I might disagree with completely, but they're clearly a rising star in their own party. There's somebody to watch and somebody to look out for. I don't see anybody like that amongst the Democrats now. No one at all. And you're absolutely right. The Republicans, by contrast, they seem to have all sorts of people now appearing and emerging within the Republican Party who are definitely people to look out for and watch. So it's quite interesting to see the political dynamism and energy on the one party, which is the Republicans, with all sorts of people coming together and, you know, coming up with all sorts of interesting ideas, and this very strange coalition of interest groups, which is what the Democrat Party has become, and one which, to my mind, is inimical to ideas.
Yeah, Canvey Island, a small peninsula in the Thames.
Oh well, there you go.
Reputed to be the starting place of the Black Death, where old rags were sorted coming in from the continent. Have a nice day from Omega Man.
Wow.
Thank you very much
That's
for that.
Interesting. That is very interesting. God.
Also, Tulsi Gabbard reneged on Biden. That is true.
Did she?
She was treated so poorly by the Democrats. Shame on the Democrats for the way they treated a person that was just running for the presidency, running in the primaries. It was terrible.
Absolutely. All right. And one who actually exposed the hollowness of Kamala Harris.
She demolished Kamala.
Demolished Kamala Harris, which is probably why, as far as the Democrats are concerned, she's an umpert.
You know they had Kamala picked from the get-go.
I agree.
They wanted Kamala from the get-go.
I agree.
That's why they came down so hard on Tulsi Gabbard. They had Kamala chosen from the very beginning.
Completely.
All right, from Anatoly, 20 milligrams of memantine in the morning, 10 milligrams of donepezil in the evening, with 1 milliliter of risperidone can keep a patient like Joe Biden stable, but not restore him.
Well, that's absolutely.
I hope I pronounced everything.
I'm sure that's true. And I have to say, I mean, I'd be very interested to know, how he's been kept going. But I'm sure they wouldn't ever share that kind of information with me. And you're absolutely right. I mean, talking about this seriously. I mean, when a decline sets in, I mean, it's irreversible because it's nature, it's biology. You can't do anything about it.
All right, from Paul Wooten, $5 super chat. Thank you, Paul. From Sparky, sexual harassment allegations aren't as bad as mass murder in nursing homes. So could Governor Cuomo being Me Too'd be a limited hangout?
I agree, yes, quite possibly. I mean, I have to say that's entirely right. And I think we do need to maintain a certain perspective. We will see how it turns out. I think he's clinging on at the moment. And I wonder for how long.
He refuses to resign.
He refuses to resign. Exactly. Yeah.
He refuses to resign. Period. From Meg DePower, your super chat. Thank you very much, Beg, for that. From Perth, Sebastian, will Xi and Putin be the pivot against the Western globalist agenda?
Well, they are possibly less from their own choice, but in Putin's case, I mean, it's very interesting to see how his ideas have evolved. And of course, because he's been in some ways at the forefront of the pressure, he's now actually thought much more about the globalist agenda than other leaders have, and he's actually speaking out against it. And we did a program about his speech at Davos, which is only gradually, by the way, I notice it's starting to pick up traction. People are starting to notice what an absolutely extraordinary speech that was. But, he attended the World Economic Forum at Davos, said all sorts of nice things through his teeth about Karl Schwab, and then went on to say that globalism and all that were completely misconceived and utterly wrong and completely disastrous for the world. It was the most extraordinary speech, a remarkable speech. It was an ideological throwing down of the gauntlets to the globalists at their center of power. A remarkable thing. Absolutely. Well,
which is why it got no press.
Why it got no press, but it's starting to trickle out. People are starting to pick up around it. So I've seen.
We've done a video on it, so check it out, everybody. It was he really laid into Klaus Schwab.
Absolutely.
Which is always fun to see Putin crush Klaus Schwab.
Absolutely.
All right. From where are we? From Hunger, $10 super chat. As an American speaking with Brits, I find it odd they accept our narrative of the War of Independence, not the loyalist Tory version. Was George III really so bad? Why is loyalist history ignored? Interesting question.
Well, that's a very interesting question indeed, actually. That's a fascinating question. I think attitudes to this have changed in the sense that I think if you'd come to Britain in say the 19th century, I think people did have a different view about things then. But of course, what's happened over the course of the 20th century is that Britain has become very close to the United States politically and economically, and of course militarily. We fought the two world wars together. And I think that has meant a lot of British people have acquired a great admiration for the United States and see in the United States the strong elder brother. I mean, of course, it's not the older brother, but it's the younger brother, the strong younger brother that helps Britain out of any problems that it gets itself into. And that means that they've gradually accepted the American view of political history. I would add that there has also been within that very large section of British society that has lent towards democratic developments of Britain's constitution. Remember, Britain is a monarchy, that they're attracted to America because, of course, America is the example of a republic and of a democracy. So there is that also.
Your thoughts, Alexander, on real quick, we'll get to super chats, but I have to get your thoughts on this. Your thoughts on Meghan Markle and Harry, and Meghan Markle's going to be on Oprah Winfrey, I think this weekend. She gave some statements where she blasted the royal family. She actually called them the firm. I believe she called them the firm, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, she did indeed. By the way, it's fairly well known that that's what they call themselves. So she's actually using that word in public, which they use between themselves in public, in private. And of course, I mean, as far as they're concerned, she's persona non grata. She's somebody that they're absolutely furious about. They're also very angry with Harry because as they see him as having been led away by her. And there's huge hostility to Harry and Meghan Markle in parts of the British media. I personally have a lot of sympathy for them. I find the whole system that they've had to live under very difficult and very suffocating. But at the same time, I am a patriotic Briton. The monarchy in Britain is very much an institution here. And when I became British, when I became a British citizen, I swore an oath of allegiance to the Queen. I actually had to do that. So that's something which I take quite seriously. So I have great sympathy for them. I understand the points they're making. I think if you look at the monarchy today, well, frankly, it's a ragged thing compared to what it was. I still have for certain personal reasons, certain residual feelings about it, which I suspect I always will. By the way, on the subject of King George III, the British do have a different perspective on him from Americans. He's seen here as a well-intentioned and well-meaning monarch, rather unintelligent, certainly not the tyrant that I think many Americans believe he was. And they also believe that he was very poorly advised at the time of the American War of Independence. American Revolution, I think the American War of Independence is what the British called it. I think the American Revolution is what many Americans prefer to call it. But King George III is certainly not somebody that those British who are historically minded have any hostility to.
Yeah, I remember the movie from Mel Gibson, like around 10, 15 years ago, called The Patriot, where it painted the British in a very, very terrible light. And I remember people in the UK were very upset about the movie and how it painted the British. Yeah.
As I was, by the way, I should say, I thought that film went far too far. I mean, obviously there were some, always bad people on both sides, and I'm not going to say that, I think that, I definitely think the American Revolution was a great thing, and I think historically, I think it was a wonderful thing that they won. But I think the way the British were shown in that film was completely wrong, and was not representative of British opinion or how the British behaved during that war. I would add, and this is an important thing to say, that during the American Revolution, there were lots of people in Britain who were strongly sympathetic to the cause of the Americans. And that included many people within the British aristocracy itself. People like the Marquis of Rockingham, who became Prime Minister, people like the Earl of Shelburne, the Duchess of Devonshire, who was an ancestress of Diana Spencer. The Whigs in Britain, who were an aristocratic party, tended to be actually very strongly pro-American. And of course, many intellectuals and many people from every walk of life in Britain were also very strongly pro-American at that time. John Wilkes, the journalist who fought for the rights of the press and who went to prison over them, and who had all kinds of problems with George III's government, he was strongly pro-American also. So I think that was an unfortunate film in many respects. And I have to say, I hope we've moved past it. And I don't think that's how most Americans feel about Britain at all.
No. What an amazing history.
Well, indeed.
The British and the Americans. What an amazing history.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we share many things in common. Britons and Americans share many things in common. And there are also important differences too, which we should not, understate. But certainly, I think that it's an amazing history, a productive and fruitful one. And I think, you can make many criticisms of Britain. I've made many criticisms of the role the British played over the Russiagate affair, for example. And I feel very strongly about those things. But let's not make the British even more horrible. Well, certainly horrible in the way that they were not.
Hollywood, Alexander. All right, from let's see, ICT. It's Thulu. It's Thulu. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. ICT Thulu. Such terrible timing. Have to skip to a meeting. Hopefully, I can catch the next one. Thank you very much for that super chat. From Mark Hewitt, the most disgusting BBC program of all time was shown this week. The title was "Why is the Coof Killing People of Color?" That was on the BBC. The BBC, Alexander, what's wrong with the BBC? They used to be the premier channel, the premier network, and now they're I don't know, just junk, it seems to me. I don't know.
I entirely agree. I'm shocked. I remember, by the way, I heard about that program, and of course it was one that I was quite determined not to watch. And the BBC is unrecognizable by comparison with the BBC that I remember, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s and whenever. I mean, I just don't understand, at least in terms of its news coverage and its documentaries and current affairs programs, how it's become what it has. But you could say the same about all of the rest of the media also. I mean, I remember the days when the New York Times was not like the newspaper it's become. What changed there? I don't know. I read the Financial Times today, and it's unrecognizable to me. The BBC is perhaps the most extreme example. Go on.
But is it the BBC? A question to you, isn't the BBC, so isn't like part of their mandate, part of their, I guess, their charter or their mandate, because it is government owned and funded, taxpayer funded? I mean, the people in the UK pay a fee every year, if I'm not mistaken, for the BBC. Don't they have to be neutral as best they can? I mean, isn't that part of the mandate?
Absolutely. And of course, they talk about it all the time. They always tell us about, how impartial and objective they are. And of course, we watch the BBC and it is no such thing. And its whole style of commentary now mixes opinion with reporting in the most blatant way, which never used to happen. And it's appalling and it's outrageous. And it has persuaded me. I used to be somebody who was, a strong supporter of the BBC and happily paid the license fee. I absolutely do not feel like that anymore. I feel that what I'm paying for is something that constantly propagandizes to me about things which I don't agree with. And even when I do agree with them, even though I do hear opinions on the BBC, which I agree with, which is increasingly rarely now, I don't like the way it's done. I feel sometimes so angry about it that even when it's said they say things that I would normally agree with, I feel so angry about the way it's said that I almost want to to disagree with it and disagree with things that I've always agreed with up to then. I'm sorry, that's a complicated way of putting it, but I think people understand what I mean. I think it is so bad now that it needs to be done away with, and we've got to start again. And we've got to relook at our media and consider whether the media that we have any longer is remotely fit for purpose. And how it came about that this change took place is something that one day we will no doubt discover when we have the whole histories of these times exposed to us, and we find out what exactly happened that led to the BBC being taken over and changed and distorted in this way. Certainly, undoubtedly, it's true that some things happened in the universities, but the British universities, which I have much familiarity with, are not like American universities. So quite how even there it came out, I mean, I just don't really understand. But no doubt we will one day find out, and I suspect it will be an upsetting and distressing story when we do.
All right. From J. Dixon Brown, a super sticker. Thank you very much for that super sticker. From David Dienstag, a $5 super chat. Thank you very much. David from Asavet MD, $15 super chat. Thank you very much, Asavet MD. From Sparky, $2 super chat. U.S. is being run by a juvenile globalist committee. Well said.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
That's exactly. Yes.
There's your answer. All right. Thank you, Sparky, for that. Always with the great comments, Sparky. From Brett Bazin, $5 super chat. What are your thoughts on Czech politics? Do you believe that they will gradually move to positions on the right, similar to that of Hungary? Actually, Alexander, we should do a story not only on Czech Republic, I believe. Slovakia or Slovenia, they are breaking with the EU in terms of dealing with the lockdowns of the pandemic. They are forming we are seeing another kind of alliance being formed in the European Union, where they are just starting to say we're sick of Brussels and we're going to go our own way. It seems. I don't know.
Well, that absolutely, and we should do, because of course I should add, by the way, that I mean my last trip, when of course one could travel, was to Prague. I went there in the summer for business. This was during that short period when the lockdown had eased and before the second lockdown began, and I had to go to Prague And of course, I spent a lot of time talking to people in Prague, and it was quite interesting to see that this country, which is, you would have expected it to be very pro-EU in so many ways, you could actually started to sense that things were starting to shift there also. So the Czech Republic is very, very interesting. I mean, it had a very interesting period of transition after the fall of communism. It had an extraordinary leader, Václav Klaus, I think his name was, who was economically very successful and was always very skeptical of the EU and was a very strong anti-communist, but at the same time somebody who actually got on with the Russians. He was a remarkable man, actually, and we don't hear enough about him anymore. He seems to have been eased out of center stage, and I get the impression also that the politics in the Czech Republic are starting to change, and I'm one of these people who somehow does manage to get into conversations with people at many levels of society when I'm in a country, from taxi drivers to waiters to academics to whatever. And I did get the sense that there was a sort of shifting of the ground in the Czech Republic. So we will see. I must point out that the president of the Czech Republic and the present prime minister of the Czech Republic are perhaps rather more anti-EU than some politicians around Europe may be. But there continues to be a very, very strong pro-EU sentiment in Prague itself. Prague is, like many capitals, different from the rest of the country. Within Prague itself, and I got the impression that the Prague local government, which is very strong, takes a different line from the one which the government of the Czech Republic tends to do. So let's talk about this, and let's generally look at the situation in the Visegrad states and in Central and Eastern Europe. And you're absolutely right. Eastern Europe is basically rebelling against lockdowns also. I mean, in fact, it's not just rebelling against them, they've collapsed to all intents and purposes there.
Yeah, agreed. From Brent Bazin, this is a great super chat on your point, Alexander. Once the EU collapses, do you believe that the Visegrad Four will form their own union based on the values that they share?
That's an interesting question, and they do share a lot of values, and there are lots of things that draw them together. Maybe one mustn't underestimate the differences. So, Hungary, Czech Republic, not Czechoslovakia anymore, the Czech Republic, Slovakia. Poland, they have a lot in common, the differences also. And we'll see how it works out. A lot will depend on also the way in which the EU collapses. I mean, if it's a chaotic collapse, for example, it might be different from what it would be if it was a much more structured collapse. But I on balance, lean to the view that these countries, having learnt to work together so much, having so much in common with each other, probably will want to continue to work together with each other after the EU ends, which I predict one day it will, by the way. In fact, I'm certain it will. And that they will form a kind of bloc. I don't think it will be any sort of union. I don't expect that at all. But certainly they will find they have a lot in common with each other, and they will be able to work with each other in ways that they've already learned to do during the period, first before they joined the EU, and then since then, after the fall of communism took place.
All right, thank you for that super chat from Sparky. Dr. Seuss cancellation is culture erasure in place for over a decade. Sean Connery, Neil Armstrong, and Chuck Yeager's deaths were barely reported.
Well, it's a very interesting comment. And I have to say, I mean, this is one of the people talk about cancel culture. Of course, what we used to read in the old days when people like myself used to read about Soviet history was about, the unpersons, how people were unpersoned, and about the white gaps This is the sort of euphemism the Russians had, in which, you know, people, you couldn't talk about them anymore. So, you know, they'd be their pictures would be deleted from photographs, and one wouldn't hear about them, and the historical record would be rewritten in such a way as to make it appear that they no longer existed. And it's strange to see phenomena like that happening in the West again. And it's interesting, again, that specific people you've mentioned and talked about, I have to say, it's disturbing. It's very, very worrying. But I do expect and predict that we will see a massive pushback against it. I mean, God knows, if we're talking about Sean Connery, the British are so proud of James Bond. I mean, we have this film that's supposed to be coming out in the autumn. Are they going to do away with that? And if they don't do away with that, they will see the films, especially the early ones, and they'll see Sean Connery. And you can't just, you know, throw him away, you know, put him in a memory hole. He's still there. I mean, it's impossible to do away with him entirely, unless you do away with that entire genre, which perhaps you will. But then that would be quite a remarkable thing. And again, if that starts to happen, the British will start to, a lot of people in Britain will start to say, well, this is so far from the Britain we know that it's not Britain anymore, and perhaps it's so far from the British we know that we don't want to be in any way part of that, and we're going to start pushing back against it because it's a violation ultimately of what we feel about ourselves. So, you know, just saying those things.
Yeah, well, you know, they could cancel James Bond, and you know, Hollywood can start to make crap films, which they are doing. I mean, every year the films and the music is just getting worse and worse and worse. But you know, the more they cancel these types of iconic characters, these very talented, I consider Sean Connery exceptional talent and exceptional talent. Absolutely. You know, they could try to cancel these people, but at the end of the day, geopolitically, as they cancel out these talents and as they cancel out these characters, they are canceling out their soft power as well.
Absolutely,
especially the United States.
Completely true. That's a very good point, actually. That is entirely true. By the way, you know, you see that. I mean, once upon a time, and our friend from Africa who talked about, you know, the enormous attractions the US had to him in the 60s. I remember that. I remember the tremendous power over us that American soft power had. And absolutely rightly so, because what the US was producing during that time was wonderful. It was extraordinary. It was amazing. And if you start debasing the value of all of this, and to an extraordinary extent, it has already happened. I mean, American soft power today is a shadow of what it used to be. Of that, I have no doubt. Once you do that, I mean, you know, you lose so much of your hard power and influence as well, because you attract people to yourself far less than you once did.
Yeah, it's because it's not based on talent anymore.
Absolutely not. Exactly. Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
All right, from Anatoly Bomios, that's who you were talking about, our friend Bomios' statement may be taken like a confirmation of the likes of Dmitry Puchkov that capitalism is a cruel system of exploitation benefiting only crooks, and global communism is the solution. Interesting super chat.
Well, it is a very, very interesting super chat. I mean, can I just say something? I mean, we are going to see more and more pressures, I think, to move away from the kind of capitalism that the United States had, which made it, you know, the society that it is. I mean, what we have today in the United States is a very, very distorted and corrupted version of capitalism. If you were an American in the 1950s and you were transported to the US today, you would not recognize it. You would not recognize the way the American economy works. You would not recognize the way American society works. And I'm not talking about technological change now. I'm talking about economics. I'm talking about ideology. I'm talking about the way in which society is structured and about the way in which America carries out its conversation. And it is not surprising that people, when confronted with that, are becoming more attracted to ideas like socialist ideas, because they see this, what they see at the moment in the United States, and they say to themselves, if this is capitalism, if the kind of system we have now is capitalism, which is so obviously rigged and so obviously distorted, well, I don't want to have any part of that. So I'm going to look for the alternative. But of course, the alternative is not the alternative that you think it is either. And of course, it's not the alternative that your own past offers. The United States, which I remember, was an extraordinarily dynamic society, and an extraordinarily rich one. I mean, enormously prosperous. And I think that Americans, if they really want to find a way forward, and not just Americans, I'm talking about more generally now, perhaps they ought to look at what was their not very distant past at all. In fact, so recent in some ways that it's almost, it feels so recent you could almost touch it.
Yeah. That goes against the word progressive, though.
Oh well, absolutely.
The whole meaning of the word progressive is to push new boundaries.
Absolutely.
So to speak.
Absolutely.
I don't know how good those boundaries are, but
and in so many spheres also. I mean, including of course in the private sphere.
Yeah, well, banning Dr. Seuss books. From Anatoly again. Loved your video on Ghislaine. Thank you for all your hard work again. Can't wait for the one on big tech governments.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep bringing it up. It's in the works. We got the big tech one coming as well, Anatoly. Yeah, the Ghislaine one, we needed to do one. We needed an update on what's going on with Ghislaine. And the trial is approaching. July will be the trial. From Refe, 499 Super Chat to the Duran. Thank you for taking my call. Tarif Simon from New Orleans at WIO News. That is the handle, at WIO News. Pfizer used the vax as political leverage.
Yes.
CHK link is in comment section after the show. All right. Thank you. Check the link. Check the link in the comment section after the show. Thank you very much, Tarif. It was great speaking with you. From John Gleason, a 10-pound super chat. Trying to divide the Irish will not work again. We are wise to their blarney. Excellent super chat, Alexander. Trying to divide the Irish will not work again.
Well, very, very true. And I can say, I mean, if we're talking about United Ireland, it's baked in the cake. It's going to happen. I mean, I went to Ireland now. I can see it coming, both amongst people in the north. Certainly amongst people in the north, I could see it coming. I also saw it amongst people in the south. And this is now, I think, an irreversible and unstoppable thing. And can I just say, it should have happened a long time ago, in my opinion. If things had been handled in a different way, both by politicians in the north and by some people in the south, I'm sure it would have come.
All right. From Billy, 5-pound super chat. What makes you so confident the right in the U.S. will prevail when all the odds are stacked against us? By the way, loving my new magic mug. All right. Thank you, Billy, for that. And yes, magic mug, guys, Duran shop. The magic mugs are great. Alexander, what makes you think that the right will prevail when Billy is correct? You have big tech, you have mainstream media, everything is stacked against them.
Because of hope based on experience. Hope because I think in the end, the right side does tend in the over the long term to prevail. Also experience, because of course what we're seeing is so completely fantastical and unrealistic coming from the other side that it is in the end unsustainable, and that which is not sustainable cannot be sustained. We've already just talked about in this program, and brilliant comments have been made about it, by the way, about how this situation with this presidency at the moment is unsustainable. But that's only one small part of the general unsustainability of the whole structure. It is unsustainable and it won't survive or prevail in the end. The other thing I have to say is this. I mean, I had many interactions with many Americans over all the periods of my life. And of course, I've been to the United States. I simply cannot believe that this very alien way of doing things in the United States can ultimately succeed against the whole prevailing weight of American history and culture and society as it has existed already. And there was a point that was made, I think by you, Alex, actually, that you see that, you know, there's rebellions going on in the 15 red states, and how that is the America that you remember. So I think in the end, all those forces will prevail. Yes, the other side has all the technology, if you like, all the machinery on their side, and you know there will be a difficult struggle, but I think in the end they will fail. And of course, the other thing they don't have, and this is the point which we discussed previously about the caliber of people in the Democrat Party, they don't have people in the end who are convincing as leaders. And without that either, how can they succeed?
Yeah, good point. From Mark Hewitt, the UK has extended its trade deal with Kenya to the rest of the East African Congress. What effect would the EAC becoming one country have?
Well, I wonder.
East African Congress.
East African. I have to say it straight away. I don't know. I mean, this isn't something I'm able to really comment about because I don't know the economics of this region that well. And I wonder whether it's what people in East Africa actually want. I mean, I've thought places like Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, they're quite different from each other in some ways, but we'll see. I mean, you know, if they do come together, if they find that they have things in common, then I can see that would create synergies and economies of scale and things that might work for them. I mean, I'm not here to say this is something they will have to decide for themselves. What I do know, and I speak now from people because there are a lot of British people who come from Kenya and East Africa. These are actually dynamic societies developing very fast in an exceptionally beautiful part of the world. And I think that they have a good future ahead of them. That's certainly what I have heard people say, and it's what I believe.
Yeah, very dynamic societies. I agree with that. All right, from Steve Bruce, thanks for the great work you are doing, and excellent shirts and mugs. Thank you, Steve, for that. Thank you very much. From Brando Commando, I agree. I think the red states are going to lead the charge for many countries in Europe to open up. I could see Poland and Hungary telling Brussels to get bent. Similarly, the red states will act as though Biden isn't their prez. Interesting comment.
Well, interesting, very interesting comment. And I think quite likely everything that you said is true. I mean, I think, of course, within Eastern Europe, there's already forms of resistance developing there, which are probably independent of the US. In a sense, they are the EU's red states. They already are that. Yeah.
Very true. Very true. From Jay Dixon Brown, movies today are awful, jaded, PU. Movies today are bad.
Yes,
I'll say that.
I mean, again, you know, as somebody who was very much of a movie buff, well, it's ages since I saw a film that, you know, I found engaging. I mean,
they're bad. There's just no way around it. Yeah. Absolutely. From Talos 828, $5 super chat. Fidesz has left the EPP. Will probably join the ECR. Do you think other parties will do the same?
Yes, I think quite likely. And I think Fidesz doing that was a big step, actually. Of course, there have been pressures to get them to leave, or rather to throw them out, which the CDU has been resisting up to now. But I think the fact that they took that decision themselves and left of their own accord is interesting and important, and is, I suspect, going to be a catalyst for other similar things like that too. And by the way, it's a completely good thing. It means that this this huge centrist bloc within the European Parliament is starting to disintegrate. And that is an entirely good thing and not before time.
Yes. From Udon Lowe's just sent a super sticker. Thanks for being here. Thank you very much for that super sticker, 1999 super sticker. Thank you. From Brando Commando, more properties will get the axe now that Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss are going away. The woke left in Hollywood don't mind losing conservative fans because the Chinese market can make up for the loss. Good point, until the Chinese market just takes over and gets rid of these guys as well.
Well, absolutely, absolutely, completely true. I mean, it's unsustainable. I mean, to be honest, I sometimes wonder now, I increasingly wonder, looking at the output of some of these films, whether commercial criteria exist anymore. Because the point about these films is not just bad, they're boringly bad. They're achingly awful. And, viewing figures are collapsing, as I understand it. You see criticisms from every conceivable direction. So how can you sustain a film industry on something like this? It doesn't make any kind of sense to me at all. I mean, make really dull and bad films that conform to some kind of ideological perspective. It seems very weird. By the way, on this, at least the Russians, actually, the Soviets, were better. I mean, believe it or not, in spite of the Soviet Union being the Soviet Union with all the controls that it had, they actually made some pretty decent films. I mean, Hollywood isn't even able to, not the Hollywood of yesterday. This Hollywood we have now, the Hollywood of today, isn't even able to do that. If they are a copy, they're a bad copy of what the Russians used to do.
Yeah, they're a bad copy. The best YouTube channel for movie critique, in my opinion, is The Critical Drinker. If anyone, I'm giving him a shout out for no reason. Man, he is so good when he breaks down movies.
I didn't know about that. I must go.
Yeah,
I must go and watch it because film criticism, by the way, was something I actually dabbled in at one time long ago. So I mean, I should really get involved in this.
Pure entertainment, and I mean, he nails it every time. All right, from Pia Robinson, I went to ARU in Cambridge for law school at 50. They bashed Trump and me so bad I left.
No.
USA is unrecognizable, as Alex says.
Absolutely true. I mean, this is the other thing. I mean, this isn't this is a law. This is supposedly a law school and all of this, but you don't get that kind of training that lawyers are supposed to have anymore. And of course, law is all about interpretation and understanding facts and weighing evidence and all that sort of thing. I mean, propaganda is completely antithetical to it. I mean, it shouldn't exist anymore, but it's absolutely the case all over the US. It's to some extent taking hold in Britain. I believe it's very advanced in France, which had a wonderful academic tradition. I'm not so sure about Germany because I don't really know much about the universities there, but it's a terrible state of affairs and very bad and very wrong. And we will have a terrible price to pay as a result.
All right. And we'll do one more super chat here, which is from Flying Boar, which is update on Idlib, Syria.
Oh, yeah. There's been exchanges of fire, apparently, between the Syrian and Turkish militaries in Idlib. So apparently the Syrian army has been making some advances. And already we see that they're coming into collision with the Turks. We will see how that works out. But the word is apparently that a big Syrian offensive is coming, and the Russians are talking to the Turks about this. There's been more contacts apparently between Erdogan and Putin, including a conversation which I haven't yet seen reported on Putin's website, but which we will no doubt find out about. But I suspect it will be mainly about Idlib.
All right, that's everything. We got everything. We got the calls, we got the super chats, we got great conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
Spartan Warrior Queen, as always, was awesome.
Yeah.
And that's it. Thank you, everyone who called us. Thank you for all your excellent questions and insight, and for answering our questions as well. We appreciate it. And all the super chats, once again, fantastic. Sparky is coming in with the last minute super chat. U.S. is saving, well, where is it? U.S. is saving grace. maybe the shift towards its states' power. Congress is weak, Biden presidency weak, giving states power by default. That is very, very smart comment, Sparky. Very smart.
Very, very true. But just do notice that, you know, weak governments can also be dangerous governments. And we also see, and this is very common with weak governments, that they often resort to more authoritarian responses. And of course, we see some of the institutions in the US seem to be readying themselves to take those kind of authoritarian steps. We shall see how it works out. But I have to say, Christopher Wray's comments, he's a director of the FBI, I found very, very disturbing indeed. And it just shocks me that he was somebody who was appointed to his post by Donald Trump. It again shows how poorly judged so many of Trump's personnel selections were, that this person who talks in this way should be director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Yeah. All right, we'll leave it on that note. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for this live stream. Take care, everybody. Any final words, Alexander, before we sign off?
No,
another 3 hour marathon. Awesome.
Yeah, I know, but it doesn't feel like that. On the contrary, it's stimulating and wonderful. And you know, I get to go away and I get to need to have a cup of tea to bring myself down to earth.
Alexander, you have to give us from Flying Boar super chat. Quick update: Nord Stream 2 and Belarus, and we have to do a video on Belarus.
We certainly do. Well. We certainly do. But Nord Stream 2, the second Russian pipeline ship, is apparently moving towards. This is the one with the special stabilizers. Is apparently joining the Fortuna to complete the pipeline. So that's pressing forward now. Purposefully. Apparently, another German company has completed its payments, so the funding is there. It seems definitely that it's going to happen now, and as far as I can see, the US government has given up, rather the Biden administration has given up the idea of sanctioning Germany to try and stop it. So Nord Stream 2 looks to me like a done thing. On Belarus, very simple, the uprising against Lukashenko failed. It failed completely.
But she's making comments. Is it? I forgot her.
Yeah.
What was her name?
Tikhanovskaya. Yeah.
She's making a lot of comments in the news.
Yeah, I know. You make all kinds of comments to make up for the fact that there's no one protesting anymore. I mean, the fact of the matter is Lukashenko is firmly in charge. There were no major strikes in any factories. In fact, there weren't any real strikes at all. There were several weeks of protests, but they seem to have died out. And he is fully in control and fully in charge. And he's had a very, very big meeting with Putin recently in Sochi. And apparently they're moving forward on all kinds of forms of industrial cooperation. There's even talk now of financial mergers and all sorts of things. So the net effect of this affair has been to strengthen Russia's position in Belarus and to defeat liberal opponents of Lukashenko. All predictable, by the way, and predicted, but that's how it's turned out. So I also have to say, I think a lot of the anger we see in the EU, which has been talked about around Navalny, I think really it's been about the failure of the uprising in Belarus. And Josep Borrell, who was the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, apparently he actually talked a lot to Lavrov about Belarus and got a very, very firm ticking off from Lavrov over Belarus when he went to Moscow. So I think for the moment, at least, that particular thing is over. Tikhanovskaya is still there. She's still making all kinds of demands and talks. Lukashenko has now made a formal request for her extradition to Belarus, which is rather interesting, given that it was he who actually let her go to Lithuania, where she currently is in the first place. Of course, that extradition will never be agreed to, but at the moment, the big protests seem to be finished, and Lukashenko looks firmly in control.
All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll leave it there. Take care, everybody. Thank you very much for everything. We really, really appreciate it. Take care.
Yeah.